Hello there, and welcome to Forgotten Worlds. My name is Thomas, and tonight I'd like to invite you into a question that lingers quietly in the background of our lives, one we rarely pause to consider, and yet it shapes every heartbeat, every breath, every memory you've ever had. The question is this: what if time itself was engineered? Not just measured by clocks or calendars, not just a backdrop we move across, but time itself, the flow, the rhythm, the very fabric of before and after as something made, crafted, set in motion. As you settle in, let your thoughts soften. Let the day loosen its grip. Picture yourself lying beneath the stars, the night sky stretching endlessly above. Somewhere, a second passes, and then another. You don't choose their pace. None of us do. Time simply carries us. But what if it wasn't simply given? What if, long ago, or from somewhere far beyond our reach, the rules of time were decided, like settings on an unseen dial? This isn't a debate, but an exploration. We won't be rushing toward answers. Instead, we'll drift slowly, following the possibilities. Science will guide us part of the way: physics, cosmology, the mysteries of entropy. Myth and philosophy will take us further: cycles, returns, and endings. And through it all, we'll keep circling back to the same quiet wonder. If time can be shaped, then who or what might have shaped it? Before we can explore those possibilities, we need to begin at the most familiar place: the way physics itself describes time. To begin, let's linger with the question of what time is, not in poetry, but in the language of science. Imagine standing in a quiet field, your eyes tracing the stars as they slowly arc across the night sky. You feel them move. You sense the passage of minutes, though you have no clock in your hand. For centuries, that movement, the steady ticking of the heavens, was enough for us to believe time was absolute. Sir Isaac Newton, writing in the 17th century, gave voice to that intuition. For him, time was a universal clock, a steady river flowing at the same pace everywhere, unaffected by the things it carried. He called it absolute time, a background framework, invisible yet perfectly dependable, in which all events unfolded. To Newton, the universe was like a great stage. Objects entered and exited, forces pushed and pulled, but the stage itself, space and time, remained untouched, unchanging, eternal. Think about what that means. In Newton's world, a second for you was the same as a second for someone on the other side of the Earth, or for a comet arcing far beyond the reach of telescopes. The tick-tock of time was impartial, steady, and universal. It was as if behind the curtain of the cosmos, a great unseen clock was keeping everything in order, ensuring no moment ever slipped ahead of another. For centuries, this idea felt so natural, so reassuring, that few questioned it. Even as the sciences advanced, absolute time remained like the quiet heartbeat of physics, unquestioned and steady. But the universe has a way of surprising us, and in the early 20th century, Albert Einstein cracked open the illusion. Einstein's theory of relativity arrived not with the bombast of myth, but with the elegance of mathematics. And it revealed something astonishing. Time was not absolute. It was flexible. It could bend, it could stretch, it could slow down. Time, far from being the steady metronome Newton imagined, was linked intimately to motion and gravity. Imagine you are traveling in a spaceship, moving close to the speed of light. For you, the minutes tick normally. Your heartbeat feels steady. Your thoughts move as they always have. But if someone were watching from Earth, they would see your clock running more slowly. To them, your heartbeat would seem to stretch. Your seconds would take longer. This is time dilation, a natural consequence of Einstein's relativity. Time itself shifts depending on how fast you are moving. Or picture a mountain rising above a deep valley. A clock at the mountain's peak will tick just a tiny bit faster than a clock down in the valley. The reason is gravity. Einstein showed that massive objects warp the fabric of space and time around them, pulling not just on matter but on the very rhythm of time itself. Near stronger gravity, time runs more slowly. Near weaker gravity, it runs faster. This is not just theory. We have measured it. Astronauts orbiting Earth age infinitesimally more slowly than those who remain on the surface. GPS satellites must account for these differences in time flow, the faster motion of their orbit, and the weaker pull of Earth's gravity at their altitude. Otherwise, their calculations would drift by kilometers in just a single day. Even here, in the quiet rhythm of your own life, your head experiences time ever so slightly faster than your feet, because it is farther from the pull of the Earth's core. So time is not absolute. It is not the steady ticking Newton imagine. Instead, it is woven into the very geometry of the universe, inseparable from space, responsive to mass, motion, and energy. It is a fabric stretching and curving around stars, flowing differently at different places, braided into the structure of reality itself. Pause for a moment and let that sink in. The second you are living right now is not quite the same as the second someone else experiences far above the atmosphere, or beside a black hole where gravity's pull is nearly infinite. The universe does not grant us all the same rhythm. It grants each place, each motion, its own tempo. And yet, from where you sit, listening to these words, it feels seamless. You don't feel your seconds bending or stretching. You don't sense the slow differences accumulating between you and a satellite overhead. To you, time feels steady. It feels like Newton's clock, ticking reliably. Perhaps that is part of the mystery. Time feels absolute, but physics whispers otherwise. What does this mean for the question we're exploring tonight? The idea of time as something engineered. Well, if time can bend and slow and stretch, then it behaves less like a perfect clock and more like a malleable medium, one that can be tuned and shaped by the conditions around it. Think of glass, transparent and fragile, yet able to be melted and molded into infinite forms. Time, it seems, might be like that. A substance woven into the cosmos, sensitive to the hands that press against it. Now imagine the extremes. Near a black hole, time slows almost to a standstill. An observer falling toward that abyss would seem to freeze at its edge, their final moments stretched toward infinity. Far from massive objects, in the vast emptiness between galaxies, time flows more freely, unimpeded. The universe already contains a spectrum of tempos, depending on where you are and how you move. If these variations exist naturally, could they also be manipulated intentionally? That is the quiet suggestion hidden inside Einstein's revelation. If time is flexible, then in principle, it can be engineered. Not easily, of course, not with human hands, not with our present understanding. But the very fact that it bends means it is not absolute. It is not fixed. It is a fabric, and fabrics can be woven. Perhaps then, Newton's steady universal clock was not wrong, but incomplete. Perhaps he glimpsed only the surface, the illusion of steadiness, while beneath, the machinery was more intricate, more pliable. And Einstein, by pulling at its edges, revealed a universe where time is not a given, but a consequence. As you let that thought linger, picture again the stars above you. Their light has traveled for years, for centuries, for millennia to reach your eyes. When you gaze at them, you are not seeing them as they are now, but as they were long ago. Time is woven into light itself, stretched across distance, bent by gravity, carried along in every particle. It is not a single clockwork rhythm, but a tapestry of shifting tempos. And this raises a subtle but profound question. If time can bend, what is it bending against? If it can stretch, what is the loom on which it is woven? To say time is flexible is to suggest it has properties, that it exists not as an empty backdrop, but as something with texture, tension, and form. If it can be curved by gravity, slowed by speed, then it is more than just an idea. It is something real, and here, perhaps, is where the whisper of design begins to creep in. Because if time is real, if it has properties, if it can be bent and tuned, then it can also, at least in principle, be shaped. Was this flexibility always present, or was it chosen? Could the malleability of time be one of those quiet parameters set in the foundation of the cosmos, like the strength of gravity or the speed of light? We do not yet know. What we do know is that time, as revealed by physics, is far stranger than the ticking seconds of our daily lives suggest. It is not universal, it is not fixed, it is relative, pliable, elastic. It carries the fingerprints of motion and the weight of gravity. And in its bending, we glimpse the possibility that time may not simply be endured, it may, in some deeper sense, be designed. If relativity showed us that time can bend and stretch, another puzzle lingers even deeper, one that touches not the pace of time but its direction. Every moment you've lived has moved one way, forward. You wake, you breathe, you grow older. Milk spoils, glass shatters, stars burn their fuel. The past recedes, the future approaches. We call this the arrow of time. But what gives time its arrow? Why does it flow in one direction and not the other? Physics itself does not demand it. Most of the great equations of science, Newton's laws of motion, Maxwell's equations of electromagnetism, even the Schrödinger equation of quantum mechanics are time-symmetric. They work just as well in reverse. If you were to film two billiard balls colliding on a table and then play the film backwards, the physics would make sense in either direction. The mathematics does not distinguish between forward and backward, and yet reality does. You have never seen a broken cup leap back together, shards reassembling and juice lifting neatly back into the glass. You have never felt yourself growing younger, cells knitting backward into infancy. The arrow insists on pointing one way. But why? The answer, at least as physics explains it, comes from a single haunting concept: entropy. Entropy is the measure of disorder, the tally of how spread out and jumbled the energy in a system has become. And the second law of thermodynamics tells us something inescapable. In a closed system, entropy tends to increase. Order drifts into disorder, not the other way around. Heat disperses, structures decay. Energy spreads until nothing remains but an even sameness. It is this march of entropy that gives time its arrow. The universe, as far as we can tell, began in a state of extraordinarily low entropy, smooth, ordered, compact, and ever since, it has been unraveling, drifting toward disorder. Every tick of every clock, every flicker of memory, every breath you take is part of that long increase. Imagine a deck of cards, perfectly ordered from ace to king in each suit. Shuffle it once, and you create a little disorder. Shuffle it again, and soon the order is gone. The chances of the deck returning to perfect sequence by random shuffling are so vanishingly small that for all practical purposes, it will never happen. That's entropy at work. The arrow points from the ordered past to the disordered future. Now imagine the cosmos as a vast deck of cards. At its beginning, it was ordered, smooth, improbable. And from there, it began to shuffle. Stars formed, burned, exploded, spreading heavy elements. Galaxies spun and collided. Planets cooled, oceans churned, life arose. Every step was, in a sense, another shuffle, not a violation of order, but a gradual unweaving of it. And so, from the beginning until now, time has had a direction. Not because the equations of physics demanded one, but because entropy, quietly and inexorably, does. And yet, This answer raises its own questions. Why did the universe begin in such an improbably ordered state? Why was entropy so low at the beginning? By all accounts, the odds of such smoothness, such fine-tuned simplicity, are staggeringly small. Some physicists argue that this is the deepest mystery of all, not that entropy increases, but that it ever had so far to increase in the first place. Think about this for a moment. If the laws of physics are time-symmetric, and if entropy is what gives time its forwardness, then it is the initial condition of the universe, that low entropy beginning, that defines the arrow. In other words, the arrow of time might not be a law at all, but a setting. And here, the speculation becomes irresistible. Was the arrow chosen? Could the forward flow of time, the fact that we remember the past but not the future, be the result of a deliberate arrangement? If the universe began with improbably low entropy, was that simply chance? Or was it, perhaps, a dial set carefully, so that experience itself could unfold in sequence? Imagine, for a moment, if the arrow pointed both ways. If entropy decreased as often as it increased, memories would dissolve, causes would follow effects, the future would blur into the past. Life, as we know it, would be impossible. Perhaps the very stability of existence, the ability to live, to change, to evolve, depends on the arrow being fixed in one direction. Perhaps the arrow is not just a byproduct but a feature. To ground this in something tangible, return in your mind to the simple image of an egg falling from a counter. When it breaks, the yolk spreads across the floor, the shell splinters into shards. This is the normal order of things. But the reverse, the yolk leaping back into the shell, the cracks sealing, the egg returning to wholeness, is so improbable that we never see it. The arrow points forward, and we accept it. But what if the improbability itself is engineered? What if, somewhere in the deep coding of reality, the arrow was fixed so that disorder would always follow order, never the reverse? Some scientists have proposed that the arrow of time is linked not just to entropy, but to the expansion of the universe itself. As space grows, as galaxies drift farther apart, entropy grows with it. Others wonder whether the arrow might emerge from the way we perceive that consciousness itself, bound to memory and anticipation, creates the illusion of direction. And yet, beneath all these models lingers the deeper question: why does the arrow exist at all? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine an alternate cosmos, a place where the equations run, but without an arrow. Particles collide and scatter, but there is no direction, no flow. There is only a static shimmer, an eternal present without past or future. It is hard even to imagine such a place, because every thought you have is framed by the arrow. You remember what came before. You anticipate what comes next. Your very identity is built from a sequence. Without the arrow, memory itself might be meaningless. If that is true, then the arrow of time is not just a physical curiosity, it is the condition of experience. It is the framework within which stories unfold, within which life evolves, within which consciousness arises. Which brings us back to our speculative thread. If time can be engineered, then perhaps its arrow, its forwardness, its insistence on sequence was part of that engineering. What would it mean to live in an engineered time? Perhaps the low entropy of the early universe was not a random roll of cosmic dice, but a parameter tuned for emergence. Emergence of stars, of galaxies, of planets, of life, of minds. A cosmos designed not just to be, but to become. And yet, the arrow also carries with it the shadow of endings. Entropy increases until, in the far future, it reaches its maximum. Stars burn out. Energy spreads into thin uniformity. The universe grows cold, dark, featureless. Heat death. If the arrow is indeed engineered, then its destination seems bleak. Unless, of course, the arrow is not final, but cyclical. Unless at the moment of maximum entropy, another setting is applied, and the deck of cards is reshuffled into order once again. For now, we live within its flow. We wake into mornings, we age into evenings. We carry memories of what has been, but never of what will be. Entropy grants us this privilege, this burden, this inevitability. And whether it is natural or chosen, it shapes every story you have ever known. So the mystery of the arrow remains. Why forward? Why not backward? Why not both? Was this asymmetry carved into the cosmos at its birth? Was it set like a dial, chosen so that we might have lives that unfold, rather than lives that collapse into simultaneity? No one can yet say. But as you breathe, as your own body ticks through its sequences, cells dividing, energy dispersing, you are participating in the arrow. You are part of its story. And if time itself was engineered, then perhaps its arrow is the clearest sign of that design. Across the ages, humans have tried to make sense of time, not only through science, but also through story, myth, and philosophy. When equations fail to soothe the deep mystery, cultures turn to symbols, cycles, and sacred narratives. And in these, we find something striking. Not every tradition has imagined time in the same way. For some, it is a wheel, endlessly turning. For others, it is an arrow, a line that points toward a single destiny. Imagine sitting beside a fire thousands of years ago, the night sky arching overhead. The stars wheel in slow procession, seasons follow one another, life emerges and fades, crops rise and fall. To early observers, time itself seemed to circle. What had been would come again. The present was just another passage in an eternal loop. This cyclical vision shaped some of the most enduring cosmologies in human thought. In Hindu philosophy, time is not a straight road but a great wheel known as Kala. Within this vision, the universe passes through vast epochs called yugas, each with its own qualities, its own rhythm of rise and decline. The Satya Yuga, the age of truth, is pure and balanced, while the later ages descend gradually into conflict, decay, and forgetfulness, until at last the cycle resets and begins again. The scale of these cycles is almost unimaginable. Millions of years, vast stretches of cosmic time, turning like the seasons, but on a scale beyond human measure. Buddhist thought also envisions cycles, though with a different emphasis. The wheel of samsara, birth, death, and rebirth places the individual soul within the rhythm of time. Each life is a link in a chain that stretches without beginning or end. Liberation comes not from breaking the wheel of physics, but from transcending the cycle altogether, awakening into timelessness. Here, time is not just cosmology but personal experience, a cycle woven into the fate of consciousness itself. Travel now, in your imagination, across the ocean to the ancient civilizations of Mesoamerica. The Maya, too, saw time as cyclical. Their calendars were intricate, interlocking gears of days, months, and long counts that traced vast cycles of history. To them, events were not isolated but echoes, repeating across eras. A king's coronation, a solar eclipse, a season of drought, all might be part of a rhythm returning from the distant past, destined to arrive again. Time was not a straight path, but a living pattern, and to understand it was to glimpse the hidden architecture of the cosmos. Now set these visions beside another one that grew in the deserts of the Middle East, carried into the scriptures of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In these Abrahamic traditions, time is not a wheel but a journey. It has a beginning, creation. It has a narrative, history. And it has an end, fulfillment, judgment, or renewal. Time here is linear, not cyclical. Each moment is unique, never to be repeated. What happens today will not return in the same way tomorrow. The story of humanity moves toward a destination, a culmination that lies in the future. This difference, cycle versus line, is more than just a matter of storytelling. It reflects two fundamentally different ways of living with time. In the cyclical view, comfort lies in recurrence. What is lost will one day return. Death is not an end, but a turning of the wheel. In the linear view, urgency arises from uniqueness. This life, this history, this moment, it is singular, and it will not come again. One philosophy offers reassurance in eternal return, the other in the promise of progress and completion. Philosophers have wrestled with these views for centuries. The ancient Greeks, too, spoke of eternal return. The Stoics believed that the cosmos itself would periodically collapse in fire, only to be reborn in the same sequence, endlessly repeating. Centuries later, Friedrich Nietzsche revived this unsettling thought, asking us to imagine living our lives again and again in infinite recurrence. Could we embrace it joyfully, or would it weigh on us like a curse? Set against this is the modern, linear conception of history, the idea of progress, of evolution, of civilization, advancing ever onward. Here, time is not a wheel but a ladder, and each rung leads higher, further, into newness. It is this view that underpins much of science, much of politics, much of how we imagine our own lives. To be human in a linear frame is to be moving forward, carrying the weight of a past that cannot return, and the hope of a future that is not yet. And yet, even within our daily lives, both visions whisper to us. The seasons remind us of cycles. Each spring, flowers bloom as they did last year. Each winter, the cold returns. Our bodies follow rhythms, to heartbeat, breath, sleep and waking, the tides of hunger and rest. But our memories remind us of the line, "You were a child, then grown." You have moments that cannot be relived, decisions that cannot be undone. You cannot walk backward into what once was. The arrow of entropy pulls you forward, even as the circle of cycles repeats around you. Now let us add speculation. If time itself were engineered, which would it be? A cycle, endlessly returning, or a line, marching toward a final destination? Perhaps both. Perhaps the cycles we see in nature, seasons, orbits, rebirths, are reflections of a deeper circular framework, while the arrow we experience in history and memory is a layer imposed upon it, like a hand setting the wheel to spin in one direction. Imagine, then, a great cosmic clock with two faces. One face is the wheel, eternally turning, repeating the patterns of days and years, of lives and deaths. The other face is the arrow, pointing forward, giving us story and sequence. To engineer time might mean weaving both together, the comfort of cycles and the urgency of the line. And perhaps that is why human cultures have never agreed on one model alone. Perhaps both are true, at different scales, in different layers of reality. Or perhaps our divided visions are themselves evidence of a deeper design, whispers of an architecture too vast for us to see in its entirety, glimpsed only in fragments. When you close your eyes tonight, think of your own life. You wake each morning as if reborn, a cycle repeated thousands of times. Yet each morning is also unique, carrying you forward, never to be lived again. The cycle and the line are braided into your experience. And if time itself is crafted, maybe that braiding is no accident. Maybe it is the way the designers or the laws or the mysteries chose to weave meaning into existence. Across cultures, time has not always been imagined as a neutral backdrop. For many, it was not an empty stage upon which history unfolded, but a force with its own presence, sometimes even its own personality. Where physics speaks of entropy and relativity, myth speaks of gods and beings who hold time in their hands, who shape its flow like potters shaping clay. These stories, though symbolic, carry a resonance that lingers. They suggest that humans have long intuited something uncanny about time, that it is not simply there, but given, not accidental, but arranged. Let us begin with the Greeks. Among their pantheon of deities, few are as enigmatic as Kronos. Not to be confused with Kronos, the titan who devoured his children. Kronos is a more abstract figure, time itself personified. Ancient sources describe him as a formless, serpentine being encircling the cosmos, marking the rhythm of existence. Where Zeus ruled the sky and Poseidon the sea, Kronos was not bound to an element but to the very unfolding of reality. In Orphic traditions, Kronos is even said to have helped generate the cosmic egg from which the ordered universe was born. Time, in this telling, is not background but progenitor. Without Kronos, there would be no beginning at all. Now shift eastward, into the intricate philosophies of India and Tibet. Here, time is not only vast but also sacredly structured. The figure of Kalachakra, the wheel of time, emerges as both a teaching and a deity. Kalachakra is more than a god. It is a system of understanding reality, linking the cycles of the cosmos with the cycles of the body, the mind, and society. Rituals devoted to Kalachakra map time onto mandalas, intricate diagrams that attempt to mirror the architecture of the universe. In this vision, time is not random drift, but a deliberate framework, one that can be understood, engaged with, and even transcended through spiritual practice. To know Kalachakra is to glimpse the gears of the cosmic clockwork, travel further still into the ancient Persian world. There, the Zoroastrian tradition introduced Zurvan, a deity embodying infinite time. Unlike the vivid gods of fire and water, Zurvan is austere, abstract, a force that precedes creation itself. In some versions of the mythology, Zurvan gives birth to the twin principles of Ahura Mazda, the spirit of light, and Angra Mainyu, the spirit of darkness. Time here is not a mere measure, but the very source from which duality, good and evil, order and chaos emerges. If Kronos encircles and Kalachakra cycles, Zurvan stretches, unending, containing within itself all that will ever unfold. Notice the pattern. Again and again, cultures personify time not as passive but as active, not as silent but as generative. Time is imagined as a craftsman, a ruler, a womb. It is not the canvas but the brush that paints upon it. To think this way is to see time as something that can be shaped or perhaps already has been. This vision recurs even outside formal religion. In Norse mythology, the Norns weave the threads of fate, binding gods and mortals alike into the loom of becoming. In Egyptian belief, the god, Ha, represented endlessness, while Nehe embodied the cyclical flow of time. In Polynesian traditions, time itself was not separate from genealogy. The ancestors were the past, living on in each moment, their presence carried forward. Everywhere, time is active, never inert. So, what do we make of this? One possibility is simple. Mythmakers, staring into the mystery of existence, gave faces and names to forces they could not otherwise describe. Time, so omnipresent and so intangible, was clothed in metaphor. Kronos and Zurvan were human attempts to speak of the unspeakable. But there is another possibility, more speculative and more intriguing. What if these myths are not merely poetry but memory? What if, in encoding time as a divine craft, ancient cultures preserved some intuition, some whisper, that time itself was not accidental but engineered? Think of myths as fossils. They do not show us the living creature, but they show us the imprint it left behind. Perhaps the gods of time are fossils of a deeper human awareness, a sense, however dim, that the arrow and the cycle are not self-born, but chosen settings. When storytellers imagined Kronos shaping the cosmos, or Kalachakra mapping cycles upon cycles, they may have been reaching toward the same intuition that physicists now voice, that time is not absolute, that it has structure, that it may even have design. Consider again Kala Chakra. Its teachings link cosmic cycles with human cycles, suggesting a harmony between the universe's great rhythms and our own inner lives. From a modern perspective, one might see this as metaphor, but another view is possible. What if the harmony is real? What if the rhythms of time are not just observed, but imposed, engineered so that minds like ours could arise within them? Zurvan, too, tempts speculation. Infinite time, birthing duality, light and darkness, creation and destruction. Physics tells us that at the universe's origin, symmetry broke. Forces split apart, distinctions emerged, the smoothness fractured into variety. Is it coincidence that mythology too places time at the root of duality? Or is it an echo of something genuine, the memory of time as the first crafted element, the mold into which all else was poured? And what of Chronos, the serpentine being encircling the cosmos? We might dismiss it as symbolic, a metaphor for the endlessness of time. But then we recall Einstein's revelation. Time and space are bound together, curved into geometry, wrapped around the universe. Is it possible that in imagining Chronos, the Greeks glimpsed something true, filtered through symbol that time itself coils around creation, shaping its boundaries? None of this is proof. Myth is not data, but myth is not meaningless either. It is humanity's oldest way of knowing, and sometimes, in its symbols, truths flicker through. Perhaps myths of time as a divine craft are not just projections of human imagination, but the shadows of an older recognition that time is not neutral, that it has been given to us, and that in its giving there is purpose. Now let us stretch the speculation further. Suppose time is engineered. Suppose its cycles, its arrows, its settings were chosen. What would that make of these myths? Perhaps they are distorted cultural memories, the way dreams distort the day's events into symbols. Perhaps ancient humans, sensitive in ways we no longer are, intuited the artificiality of time and told stories to hold on to that insight. Or perhaps, and here is the wilder thought, myths are not memories of human intuition, but of communication. What if beings beyond us, engineers of time itself, whispered fragments into the myths of many cultures? What if Chronos, Kalachakra, and Zurvan are not inventions but garbled recollections of real powers, real architects who set the clocks of the cosmos? You do not need to believe this. It is only a thought experiment, a possibility to rest your imagination upon. The myths are there, regardless, stubbornly insistent across continents and centuries. Time is not just a stage, but a presence, a craft, a force that shapes rather than merely contains. As you sit with this, notice your own breath. Each inhale, each exhale, a cycle. Each moment, unique, never to return. Even here, the myths echo, the wheel and the line, both present, both necessary. And perhaps, just perhaps, the very fact that we can sense them is itself the trace of design. When we speak of beginnings, we usually mean the start of a story, the first line of a book, the opening note of a song, the first light of dawn. But what does it mean to speak of the beginning of time itself? Not just the beginning of stars or planets, not even the beginning of space, but the first tick of the very clock by which beginnings are measured. Modern cosmology points us toward a startling answer. About 13.8 billion years ago, the universe as we know it exploded into being in what we call the Big Bang. This was not an explosion in space, it was the expansion of space itself. Galaxies did not burst outward into emptiness, rather, the emptiness itself stretched and carried them apart. And with that expansion, time began. To say time began is almost impossible to grasp. Our minds are trained by experience to imagine a before. Before the sunrise, there was night. Before the river, there was rain. But if time itself had a beginning, there was no before, there was no earlier moment to precede it. no hidden chamber where the clock was waiting to be wound. At t equals 0, the equations themselves falter. Physics stares into the singularity and falls silent. Think of it like this. Every moment you have ever known has been part of a chain, each link connected to the last. The Big Bang is the first link. But there is no link behind it. The chain simply stops. You may try to ask, what was before the Big Bang? But the question itself may have no meaning. Without time, before is empty. It is like asking, what is north of the North Pole? The words reach, but they cannot find. And yet, for all its strangeness, the Big Bang is not speculation. The light from that event still fills the universe, stretched into faint microwaves by billions of years of expansion. This cosmic background radiation whispers to us across the sky, a reminder that time itself once had a starting line. But here the wonder deepens. If time began 13.8 billion years ago, what caused it to begin? Did it simply spark itself into being? Was the switch flipped by chance, or by necessity, or by something beyond either? Physics has struggled with this. At the singularity, where density becomes infinite and our equations collapse, the very fabric of cause and effect begins to unravel. We cannot yet say what lies at that boundary, whether it is a true edge of reality or merely the edge of our understanding. And yet, the question lingers. If time was switched on, who or what flipped the switch? Some physicists suggest that the universe may have emerged from quantum fluctuations, tiny ripples in a sea of nothingness that gave rise to something. Others propose that time may be a property that crystallized when conditions were right, like ice forming on the surface of water. Still others wonder whether time itself is an illusion, a pattern we perceive in the flow of change, rather than a fundamental aspect of reality. Each theory, however elegant, leaves us with the same haunting thought. If time began, then it could have been otherwise. Its beginning was not inevitable. Something set it in motion, whether law, chance, or will. Now allow yourself to picture it. A moment of utter stillness, not even silence, because silence is measured against sound. Not even emptiness, because emptiness implies space. A moment beyond moments, where no seconds pass, where no events unfold. And then the switch. Suddenly, expansion. Suddenly, time. The first heartbeat of reality. What was that switch? Was it a spontaneous spark of probability? A collapse of quantum potential into actuality? Or was it something more deliberate, a choice, a design, an act of creation written into the architecture of being? Myth, once again, offers its own reflections. Many traditions begin with time itself being fashioned by divine hands. In the Hebrew scriptures, creation begins with evening and morning, the marking of days. In Hindu cosmology, Brahma breathes worlds in and out of existence, each exhalation a new cycle of time. Even the Greeks imagined Kronos as fathering the cosmos, suggesting that time was not given but bestowed. Perhaps these stories are not literal, but perhaps they echo something physics now hints at, that time itself is not eternal, that it has a beginning, and therefore that it may also have a cause. If time was engineered, then the Big Bang could be seen not as an accident, but as the ignition of the system, the pressing of the start button. Just as a programmer sets a simulation running with a single command, perhaps the cosmos was set into motion at that singular moment, the laws of physics initialized, the arrow of time unleashed. To entertain this thought is not to abandon science, but to listen to what science itself implies. If time began, then its existence is contingent. It depends on something. And if it depends, then we are left to ask on what. Picture again the universe at its birth, a newborn cosmos smaller than an atom, yet carrying within it the potential for galaxies, for stars, for life, for you. That unfolding required not only matter and energy, but also time. Without time, nothing could evolve, nothing could change, nothing could exist in sequence. Time is not merely a stage on which reality plays, it is part of the play itself, one of the essential characters. And so, when we look back to the beginning, we are not just asking how the universe began, we are asking how time itself began. Did it emerge from nothing? Was it seeded by laws beyond our comprehension? Or was it chosen, a setting in a deeper architecture of reality, a deliberate tuning of the most fundamental parameter of all? Perhaps one day physics will pierce the singularity, will describe in equations what came before the first moment. Or perhaps that boundary will always remain opaque, a veil through which we can only imagine. But either way, the question will remain, soft and insistent. If time began, then it might have been otherwise. And if it might have been otherwise, then perhaps, just perhaps, it was designed to be as it is. For many, the idea that time had a first moment is difficult to accept. Our instincts pull us toward continuity, toward something stretching endlessly backward. If the universe began, what came before? If time had a first tick, what set the clock? These questions press so insistently that some scientists and philosophers have sought alternatives, models in which time has no singular starting point, but instead extends forever, or loops, or branches without end. One such vision is the eternal universe. In this view, the cosmos has always existed, without origin, without a birth. The Big Bang was not the first moment of time, but simply one chapter in an unbroken story. Some versions imagine an endless, steady state, where matter continuously emerges to keep the cosmos from thinning as it expands. Others suggest that the Big Bang was not unique, but one among infinite expansions and contractions, each flowing into the next. The cyclic universe is one of the most evocative of these ideas. Imagine time not as a line with a beginning and an end, but as a circle, vast beyond measure, repeating itself endlessly. In some models, the universe expands from a dense state, then slows, contracts, and collapses into another singularity, only to explode again in another Big Bang, another expansion, another cycle of galaxies, stars, and lives. Each cycle could be unimaginably long, yet finite, and the chain of cycles infinite. Even modern physics has entertained this possibility. Certain interpretations of string theory and cosmology propose that our Big Bang may have been the collision of higher dimensional brains, sheets of reality brushing against each other in a grand cosmic rhythm. Each collision births a new universe, and the pattern could stretch eternally. If so, the beginning we see is only the latest in a sequence with no first step. Then there is the idea of the multiverse. Here, our universe is not alone but one among countless others. Some are born through inflationary processes, bubbles budding off an inflating space like foam on an endless sea. Others arise through quantum branching, each decision spawning parallel worlds. In this vision, time may not have a singular origin because there is no single universe to have one. Time, instead, is local, a property of each cosmos, each branch, each bubble, while the greater multiverse stretches without beginning or end. What unites these alternatives is their resistance to the finality of a first moment. They suggest that what we see as a beginning may be more like a horizon, edge of what we can perceive, not the edge of reality itself. Beyond it lies more universes, more cycles, more time. But even here, speculation opens the door to another possibility. What if the impression of beginnings and endings is itself engineered? Think of a video game. When you press start, the world appears to begin, landscapes load, characters emerge, time within the game flows from a first frame to the next. But outside that frame, on the disk or in the code, the world already existed in potential. The beginning was not a beginning at all. but the activation of a system that had always been there. Could our universe be similar? Could the Big Bang be less the birth of everything than the moment when one cycle, one simulation, one phase was switched on? If so, then the sense of beginnings and endings may be less about cosmic truth and more about cosmic presentation, a way of structuring experience, of giving story to existence. Perhaps cycles are engineered to ensure renewal. Perhaps the illusion of a singular beginning is necessary to make meaning possible, to allow beings like us to ask, where did it all start? And what comes after? In this light, even the cyclic models could be seen as scaffolding. If universes collapse and restart, if beginnings bloom again and again, then each beginning is both real and not final. The arrow of entropy leads toward heat death, but if the cycle resets, then time becomes an infinite spiral, not a straight line, not a static circle, but an endlessly engineered return. And what of the multiverse? If countless universes exist, each with its own time, its own arrow, its own rules, then perhaps beginning is simply a local condition. Time may always be beginning somewhere, always ending somewhere else. To engineer such a system would not be to create a single universe, but to set in motion a vast garden of realities, each blooming and fading, each perceiving itself as the only story, unaware that it is one chapter among billions. Some scientists argue that the question of beginnings may be misguided altogether. Time, they suggest, may not be fundamental. It may be emergent, arising only under certain conditions, like temperature in a gas. In that case, the search for a first moment is like asking for the first second of a rainbow. The rainbow appears, fades, and appears again, but it does not have a true origin apart from the conditions that allow it. If time is emergent, then beginnings and endings may be illusions, necessary illusions, but illusions nonetheless. Speculation extends this further. If time is emergent, and if beginnings are illusions, then perhaps those illusions were crafted. To live a story requires a start and an end, even if beyond the story no such things exist. Perhaps what we experience as the beginning of the universe is less a physical necessity than a narrative frame, engineered so that life within it would have orientation, direction, and meaning. It is unsettling to think that the most fundamental aspects of reality, beginnings, endings, the flow itself, may not be ultimate truths but features, settings, parameters, but whether natural or engineered, the effect is the same. We experience time as a current with a source and a destination. We ask, where did it all begin? Not because the answer is simple, but because the question itself may be part of the design. And so, alternatives to a beginning eternal universes, cyclic models, multiverses do not remove the mystery, they deepen it. For even if time has no true beginning, even if it loops or branches or stretches forever, we are still left to wonder, why should it be so? Why should there be cycles rather than nothing, branches rather than silence, eternity rather than void? Perhaps, in the end, the distinction between beginning and no beginning is itself another veil. Perhaps what matters is not whether time started, but whether it was chosen to flow at all. And if so, then every model, whether linear or cyclic or infinite, carries the same unspoken suggestion that time, however it appears, is not merely endured, but given. When people look up at the night sky, they often see mystery. Some see the hand of a creator, others the elegance of mathematics, still others the vast indifference of chance. But in recent years, another idea has crept into the conversation, strange, unsettling, and oddly compelling. What if the universe itself is a simulation? The simulation hypothesis suggests that reality, down to its deepest fabric, may be more like code than like stone. That what feels solid, what feels eternal, might in fact be the output of an immense computational system. Within such a framework, the rules of physics are not absolute laws but parameters, instructions written into the architecture. And if the laws are parameters, then time itself may be nothing more than a programmed setting. Think about a video game. Inside the game, characters move, events unfold, stories progress. From within, time feels seamless. A player walks across a virtual landscape. The sun rises and falls, battles are fought, lives are lived. But outside the game, time is flexible. A player can pause the world, they can speed it up or slow it down. Hours inside the game might pass in minutes outside, or vice versa. Time, within the simulation, is not a fundamental constant, it is an adjustable dial. Now, bring that analogy back to the cosmos. What if our experience of seconds and minutes, our sense of history stretching behind us and possibility unfolding ahead, is the result of such a dial? What if time, as we know it, is a parameter chosen by the system's architects, set to flow in one direction, at one pace, with certain constraints? It is worth noting that even in our own small creations, we play with time this way. In strategy games, players often speed up the clock to watch centuries pass in moments. Empires rise and fall like tides. In simulation programs, time can be compressed so that process is too slow for human patience. The growth of cities, the evolution of species unfold at watchable speeds. Conversely, in games where detail matters, time can be slowed so that the smallest gestures, the briefest actions, stretch into whole experiences. We do this casually, without a second thought. To us, it is natural to imagine time as something adjustable. If humans, with our limited computing power, already treat time as malleable within our simulations, what might a vastly greater intelligence be capable of? Could our own reality be running on such a system, with time's flow chosen not by necessity, but by preference? Some theorists have pointed out peculiar hints that echo this possibility. The universe, at its deepest level, seems to be quantized, broken into discrete packets of information, like pixels on a screen or bits in a program. Quantum mechanics suggests that space, energy, and perhaps even time itself come in indivisible units. If that is true, then reality is not continuous but digital. It is computed, and if reality is computed, then time may function like a clock cycle in a processor. Each tick of cosmic time might be the equivalent of a computational update, the system advancing from one state to the next. We experience this as the flow of time, but from outside, it could be nothing more than the stepping of code through its instructions. Speculation extends further. If time is a parameter, then it might not be fixed. Different regions of the simulation might operate under different temporal settings. Perhaps what we perceive as the stretching of time near black holes, the slowing of clocks, the dilation of seconds is not just a consequence of gravity, but a reflection of variable time settings written into the program. In one part of the simulation, time is slowed. In another, sped up. To us, these differences look like physics. To the system, they may simply be design. This idea also offers a curious perspective on relativity itself. Einstein showed us that time is relative to speed and gravity, but why should that be so? Why should the pace of time differ simply because one object moves faster than another, or because one stands deeper in a gravitational well? From a simulation standpoint, such relativity could be intentional, an elegant way to balance the system, to keep its complexity in check, to ensure that information flows in harmony across vast scales. Now pause and bring this close to home. Look around your room, the clock on your wall, the phone in your hand, the shadows shifting across the floor. You assume that time is moving evenly for all of them, that the seconds pass with impartial steadiness. But what if they are all bound together by code, their synchronization not natural but engineered? What if what feels like the impartial flow of time is, in fact, the hum of a program running in the background, steady not by necessity but by design. There is something both thrilling and unnerving about this thought. If time is programmed, then it could, in principle, be reprogrammed. The architects of the system, whether natural laws, higher intelligences, or entities beyond our comprehension, could alter the dial. They could slow the universe into stasis or speed it into chaos. They could loop a moment endlessly, replaying it again and again. They could stretch an instant into eternity or compress an eternity into an instant. What would that mean for us? For our lives? Perhaps déjà vu is not a trick of memory but a glitch, a skipped frame in the program. Perhaps strange moments of timelessness, those flashes in meditation, in dreams, in crises when seconds stretch into vast landscapes, are hints of the system adjusting its settings, slowing the cycle just for us. Speculation, yes, but it aligns with something humans have long intuited. We have always played with time in our stories. We imagine time travelers, loops, frozen moments. We dream of slowing it down, of speeding it up, of stepping outside it altogether. Perhaps these stories are not merely fantasies, but unconscious echoes of the deeper truth, that time is not ultimate, but constructed. If time is a simulation setting, then the question becomes, why this setting? Why this particular pace, this particular arrow, this particular rhythm of seconds and years? What purpose does it serve? Maybe the answer is simple. This setting is the one in which beings like us can exist. If time flowed more quickly, perhaps matter could never form, stars could never burn steadily enough to nurture life. If it flowed more slowly, perhaps change would never accumulate, evolution would never unfold, consciousness would never awaken. The settings may not be arbitrary, they may be tuned, delicately balanced to allow story, growth, and awareness to emerge. And if so, then time, as we know it, is not a prison but a gift, not merely a limit but a design. As you let that possibility rest in your thoughts, imagine once more the stars above you. Imagine them not just as distant suns, but as pixels in an immense display. Imagine the laws of physics not as eternal truths, but as rules of a program. Imagine time itself, the very heartbeat of existence, as a setting chosen long ago. The dial turned just so that you could sit here now, breathing, listening, wondering. If the universe can be imagined as a simulation, then physics itself may be nothing more than its source code. Equations, constants, and laws. The grand architecture of reality could be instructions written into the system. To study physics, then, is to read the program line by line, uncovering the algorithms that make existence possible. This idea is not entirely metaphor. In recent decades, physicists and philosophers have begun to speak of the universe in terms of information. Not merely matter and energy, but bits quanta of information woven into the fabric of reality. John Archibald Wheeler, one of the 20th century's most visionary physicists, coined the phrase "it from bit." He suggested that every particle, every field, every phenomenon arises not from substance but from information, from binary yes or no decisions, the bits that compose the cosmic code. If Wheeler was right, then the universe is a computation, a self-running program, advancing step by step. And if the universe is a computation, then time may be its clock cycle, the pulse that pushes the system forward from one state to the next. Think of a computer in front of you. Beneath the screen, beneath the programs, beneath the images and sounds, there is a processor running at a specific speed. Billions of times per second. It flips between states, moving the system forward. You never see the clock cycle directly. What you see are its results. Smooth motion, unfolding story, continuity. Now imagine the universe in the same way. Each tick of cosmic time could be the equivalent of a processing step, an advance in the universal computation. What we experience as seconds are simply the rhythm of the underlying processor. Quantum mechanics, with all its strangeness, seems to support this view. At the smallest scales, reality is quantized, chopped into indivisible units. Energy comes in quanta. Information comes in discrete packets. Even time itself may come, in Planck intervals, unimaginably small slices, the smallest possible ticks of the cosmic clock. Between one tick and the next, the universe updates, advancing the simulation. This view casts the laws of physics in a new light. The speed of light, for instance, could be understood not as an arbitrary constant, but as a processing limit, the maximum speed at which information can propagate across the system. Quantum entanglement, the mysterious instant connection between particles across vast distances, might be evidence of a deeper layer of code, a shared memory space beneath the apparent separation of objects. The fine structure constant, that strange, dimensionless number that shapes the behavior of atoms, might be nothing more than a parameter set like a slider in the code to ensure stability. Speculation grows bolder here. If fundamental constants are indeed parameters, then they could have been tuned. Why is the speed of light exactly what it is? Why is gravity so weak compared to the other forces? Why does the charge of the electron have the precise value it does? For decades, physicists have marveled at how fine-tuned these constants seem, how delicately balanced they must be for life to exist. Change them slightly, and stars would not burn, atoms would not hold together, chemistry would collapse. To some, this is coincidence. To others, it is necessity. But within the code metaphor, it is something else. Configuration. The constants are not accidents, they are settings. Time, too, could be such a setting, programmed to flow in the particular way that allows consciousness to emerge. Imagine again a simulation. A developer sets the parameters: gravity, strength, particle behavior, time flow. Adjust them slightly, and the simulation collapses or stagnates. Adjust them correctly, and it flourishes. What we call physics could be precisely this: the carefully chosen balance of code parameters written into the operating system of reality. Some physicists already flirt with this language. They describe black holes as the ultimate hard drives, storing vast amounts of information in their event horizons. They speak of the universe as a quantum computer, processing states, evolving wave functions. The mathematics of quantum information theory maps neatly onto the mathematics of physical reality, as if the two were different languages describing the same underlying truth. If so, then time as we know it is not fundamental, but emergent. It arises because the code requires updates, because the computation must move step by step. Each tick is a line of code executed, a new frame generated, a new state rendered. From outside the system, time might not exist at all. There would be only code, running, but from within, we experience the flow as an arrow, a sequence, a life. Now pause and let this possibility wash over you. The seconds you are living this moment, this breath may not be part of an eternal flow, but part of a processing rhythm. What feels natural may be structured. What feels inevitable may be programmed. Speculation takes us one step further. If time is the clock cycle of cosmic processing, then anomalies in physics could be seen as hints of its architecture. Quantum randomness, those unpredictable flickers of probability, could be the equivalent of random number generators in code. Dark energy, the mysterious force accelerating cosmic expansion, might be a background function, a system-wide update rolling out across the simulation. Even entropy itself, the increase of disorder, could be understood as a memory leak, the system gradually dispersing information until reset. And what of us, the observers? In a computational universe, consciousness itself may be another layer of code, running on the substrate of physics. Our perception of time, our memory of past, our anticipation of future may be the interface the program provides for minds like ours. Time may not only be the processor's clock cycle, but the operating system's user interface, a way of making the code comprehensible to creatures living within it. Now ask, could there be evidence of time programming in the constants of reality? Perhaps the very fact that we can measure time at all, that it flows consistently enough to sustain memory and causality, is evidence. Perhaps the arrow of time, arising from low entropy at the universe's birth, is not a natural accident, but a programmed initialization condition, the equivalent of setting the clock to 0 when the simulation launches. Perhaps the flow we experience is not the only possible one, it is simply the one chosen. From here, imagination stretches into vertigo. If physics is code, then time is not eternal. It is a feature, and like all features, it could, in principle, be changed. What if the system could be patched, updated, reprogrammed? What if one day, beings like us could access the code itself, altering the flow of time as easily as a developer alters a line of script? We are not there yet. For now, we are bound within the illusion of seamless flow, but even to imagine it is to glimpse a possibility, that time, in all its mystery, is not the backdrop of reality, but the product of it. Not the stage, but the script. Not the law, but the code. And if so, then the question of engineering time becomes less speculative and more direct. If time is code, it can be written. And if it can be written, then perhaps it already was. Long before physicists dared to suggest that time might be flexible, writers and storytellers were already bending it in the realm of imagination. Science fiction, perhaps more than any other genre, has always been a laboratory of speculation, a place where human curiosity is free to tinker with the rules of reality, reshaping them into thought experiments, parables and dreams. Time, with all its mystery, has proven irresistible. Think of the countless tales spun around the idea of a machine that could travel through time. H.G. Wells, in his 1895 novel, The Time Machine, gave the world not only one of its earliest literary time travelers, but also the very phrase, time machine. In his story, time is no longer an unstoppable current, but a dimension to be navigated, like space. A traveler climbs into a contraption of brass and ivory, pulls a lever, and suddenly the future unfolds in a dizzying blur. The past recedes like scenery viewed from a train. Wells's idea was revolutionary, not just because it allowed readers to imagine visiting distant ages, but because it suggested that time might be engineered, manipulated by human hands. From that spark grew an entire tradition of storytelling. Writers imagined frozen moments where characters could wander while the rest of the world stood still. They invented timelines that splintered into alternatives, histories rewritten by a single choice, futures branching like trees. They described universes where time loops endlessly, trapping characters in repetition, or where it flows backward, turning cause into effect, memory into prophecy. These stories reveal something profound. Humanity has always been fascinated not only with observing time but with controlling it. In our myths, gods wove time like cloth. In our philosophies, sages pondered cycles and arrows. But in our fiction, ordinary people, scientists, travelers, dreamers, took up the tools of time and tried to shape it themselves. Consider the trope of frozen time. Countless novels and films have toyed with the idea of stopping the clock, halting the world mid-breath. A character wanders through a city where raindrops hang motionless in the air, where conversations hang unfinished, where motionless crowds become statues. To the character, the moment stretches into infinity. To everyone else, it never happened at all. This fantasy is both thrilling and unsettling. It reflects our deep desire to pause life at its most precious moments, to hold on to beauty, to savor love, to delay loss. It also reveals our fear of stasis, of being trapped in a world where nothing ever changes. Frozen time is both gift and curse, freedom and prison. Then there are stories of altered timelines. In these tales, time is not a single road but a network of paths. A traveler steps on a butterfly in the distant past, and the future changes beyond recognition. This is the so-called butterfly effect, popularized in chaos theory but long embedded in fiction. The smallest alteration ripples outward, reshaping everything. Such stories dramatize the fragility of our present, how every moment is balanced on countless contingencies, how easily the story of reality might have been different. And then there are the paradoxes. The grandfather paradox, where a traveler goes back and prevents their own existence. The bootstrap paradox, where an object or idea loops endlessly without origin. A book passed back in time, rewritten, and returned until its authorship disappears into the loop. These paradoxes are not just narrative puzzles. They hint at the deeper possibility that time itself has safeguards, rules that resist tampering, as though the fabric of reality were engineered to prevent collapse. Science fiction returns to these ideas again and again, not because they are easy, but because they are irresistible. We want to know, what if we could shape time? What if we could step outside its flow, turn it backward, stretch it forward? What if time were not a prison, but a tool? Even outside the classic stories, popular culture is saturated with these dreams. Films slow time into bullet time, letting us dodge fate in suspended moments. Television shows play with loops, letting characters relive the same day until they learn the lesson the universe demands. Comics, games, and novels invent worlds where time is currency, weapon, or puzzle. The fascination is endless because the desire is universal: to hold on, to change, to undo, to leap ahead. But notice something deeper here. When fiction imagines time as malleable, it is often not describing time as physics does, but as experience. We want to rewind not galaxies but moments in our lives. We want to pause not entropy but the fleeting seconds of joy. Fiction reveals that our hunger to engineer time is, at its heart, personal. We don't simply want to control the cosmos. We want to control our stories, our memories, our losses. And yet, fiction does more than mirror desire. It also prepares the mind for possibility. When scientists demonstrated time dilation with atomic clocks, showing that moving faster or sitting deeper in gravity makes time flow differently, the world was astonished. But readers of science fiction were not surprised. They had already traveled to futures and pasts in their imagination. When quantum physics hinted that time might be emergent, not fundamental, thinkers had already glimpsed that idea in speculative tales. Fiction gives us metaphors before science gives us measurements. Perhaps that is its greatest contribution. By imagining time as engineered, science fiction keeps the door open. It prevents us from assuming that time is fixed, that it must always flow as it does now. It whispers that things could be otherwise, that behind the apparent solidity of seconds and years, there may lie something more pliable. Now, let your thoughts drift a little. Imagine a library filled with all the time stories humanity has told. Shelves of novels, reels of film, stacks of scripts and comics, all circling around the same obsession. In each time bends differently. In some, it is conquered. In others, it is a trickster. In still others, it is revealed as illusion. Yet together, they form a collective dream, a chorus of voices saying the same thing. Time is not immutable. It can be touched, altered, engineered. If the universe is indeed code, if time is indeed a setting, then perhaps these stories are not just fantasies but intuitions. Perhaps fiction is humanity's way of rehearsing for truths we have not yet reached, truths that science may one day confirm. When Wells placed his traveler in a machine, he may have been doing more than telling a story. He may have been tuning our minds to imagine the unimaginable, preparing us to see time not as a chain but as a tool. And so, science fiction stands as both mirror and guide. It reflects our longing to master time, and it guides our imagination toward the possibility that time is not given but made. Each story is a small experiment, a test of what could happen if the rules were changed. And perhaps, in those experiments, we glimpse something real, the hint of an engineered time waiting for us to discover it. Fiction may give us metaphors, but science gives us measurements. And over the last century, humanity has not only dreamed of shaping time, it has begun to touch it. What once seemed like fantasy has, step by small step, revealed itself as fact. The discoveries are not always dramatic. There are no gleaming machines carrying us centuries forward or back. Instead, they are precise, careful, and astonishing in their implications. They show that time, far from being immutable, can be stretched and bent under the right conditions. The first real crack in the illusion of absolute time came with Einstein's theory of relativity. His equations revealed that time is not universal, not a steady background tick, but relative tied to speed and gravity. If you move quickly, time slows for you compared to someone at rest. If you sit deep in a gravitational well, time moves more slowly than for someone higher above. At first, this sounded impossible, almost absurd. But as technology advanced, experiments confirmed it again and again. Consider the simplest demonstration: atomic clocks. These are the most precise instruments we have ever built, capable of measuring time to within billionths of a second. Place one on the ground floor of a building and another on the roof, and you will find that they tick at different rates. The one closer to the Earth's center, deeper in the gravity well, runs slightly slower. The difference is tiny, but measurable. It is not an error, it is reality. Gravity itself changes the flow of time. Or take motion. Fly an atomic clock around the world on a jet, and when it returns, it will be slightly out of sync with a clock that stayed on the ground. The faster the speed, the greater the difference. Astronauts orbiting Earth age just a fraction more slowly than their twins below. Over a lifetime, the effect is small, but near the speed of light, it becomes enormous. To a near-light traveler, decades on Earth might pass in what feels like hours. This is not speculation. It is a direct consequence of the physics we have tested and confirmed. Already, humanity depends on this fact. The GPS system that guides your phone and car relies on satellites orbiting above the Earth. Those satellites move quickly and sit in weaker gravity than the surface. Both effects cause their onboard clocks to drift compared to ours. Without correcting for relativity, GPS would be useless, its readings off by kilometers within a single day. Every time you check a map, you are relying on humanity's ability to engineer time, not fictionally, but practically. But relativity is only the beginning. Scientists have begun experimenting with ways to deliberately slow or alter atomic time itself. By cooling atoms to near absolute zero, by trapping them in optical lattices of light, researchers can stretch or compress their vibrations, the very oscillations that define their ticking. These experiments do not only measure time, they manipulate it. They show that time, as physics defines it, can be coaxed into different behaviors under extreme conditions. One striking example comes from experiments with ultra-cold strontium atoms. When suspended in laser light, these atoms can be made to tick at slightly different rates depending on how high they sit above the Earth. A fraction of a millimeter is enough. The effect is relativity at its smallest measurable scale, a glimpse of how time can be engineered not only by cosmic forces but by precise human intervention. What does this mean? For now, it means better clocks, instruments so precise they could keep perfect time for longer than the age of the universe. But beyond that, it suggests possibility. If we can already measure and manipulate time at the scale of atoms, perhaps one day we can scale that knowledge upward, shaping the flow of time in larger systems, perhaps even in human experience. Speculation opens the door further. If time can be slowed by gravity and speed, could we one day create environments where time flows differently, chambers of slow time, where minutes outside are hours within? Could we build habitats where biological processes are stretched, prolonging life, slowing decay? Conversely, could we accelerate time, compressing processes that would normally take centuries into days? Imagine experiments in evolution or chemistry sped up by orders of magnitude. To engineer time would be to engineer possibility itself. And yet, there are hints that we already participate in this shaping. Quantum physics suggests that observation itself may affect how events unfold in time. Consciousness, measurement, and sequence are strangely entangled. If so, then perhaps our role in engineering time is not only technological but experiential. We may not yet build time machines, but our very presence as observers could already be part of the way time becomes what it is. The dream, of course, is greater, to step beyond passive participation and into mastery, to do with time what we now do with light: bend it, split it, focus it, accelerate it. We have already learned to manipulate the electromagnetic spectrum in ways that would have seemed godlike to our ancestors. Perhaps time is the next frontier, waiting for us to develop the tools to shape its flow. If that happens, what doors would open? We might heal by slowing time in damaged tissues, giving cells space to repair. We might extend lives by bending time around individuals, granting them centuries in what to others is only decades. We might explore the stars by placing ships in bubbles of altered time, traveling across galaxies while years pass only lightly for the travelers. We might even create new realities, simulations within simulations, where time itself is tuned for purpose, faster here, slower there, each environment designed for its own story. These are speculative futures, distant and uncertain, but the path toward them is already underfoot. Every clock adjusted for relativity, every atom slowed in optical traps, every experiment with the flow of time is a step in that direction. Slowly, carefully, we are learning not just to measure time but to shape it. Perhaps then, science fiction's dreams are not as far-fetched as they once seemed. Perhaps the difference between imagining and engineering is only time itself, time that we are learning to fold, stretch, and command. And if so, then one day the line between natural time and engineered time may blur entirely. The seconds you live, the years you count, the history you inherit, all may one day be malleable, sculpted by hands not unlike yours. For now, we wait at the threshold. We hold precise clocks in our hands and peer at atoms suspended in light, watching them tick at different rates. We marvel at astronauts returning fractionally younger than when they left. We glimpse in these small differences the vast truth. Time is not untouchable. It is pliable, flexible, open to intervention. And in that pliability lies the possibility that time may not only be engineered by us in the future, but may already have been engineered long before we arrived. So far, we have spoken of time as though it were a fabric, a river, a clock cycle, a current that can bend and slow but that always remains. Yet when we peer into the deepest levels of reality, into the quantum world, the mystery deepens further. There, in the language of equations and probabilities, time itself begins to dissolve. In classical physics, time is a given. Newton imagined it as absolute, Einstein showed it as relative, but both still treated it as real. A stage, however flexible, on which events unfold. But in quantum mechanics, the rules change. Time does not appear as a fundamental building block. It is not one of the operators that define particles, not one of the quantized units that make up reality. Instead, Time slips into the equations as a parameter, a background reference against which other changes are measured. This may sound subtle, but the implications are profound. It means that, at the smallest scales, particles and fields do not require time in the same way we do. They are described by wave functions, by probabilities of being here or there, of spinning this way or that. These probabilities evolve, yes, but what they evolve in is not time itself, but a parameter that we have inserted, an ordering that may be only apparent. The strangeness becomes sharper when we look at attempts to unify quantum mechanics with Einstein's relativity, the dream of a theory of quantum gravity. Here, one of the most important tools is something called the Wheeler-DeWitt equation. Developed in the 1960s, it is an attempt to describe the wave function of the universe as a whole. And when you write it down, you notice something startling. There is no time variable. The Wheeler-DeWitt equation is timeless. It describes a universe not as a sequence of moments, but as a static state, a grand, frozen superposition of all possibilities. In this picture, time does not flow. It is not part of the foundation. Instead, what we call time must somehow emerge from this timeless reality, the way patterns emerge from a static mandala, or the way music emerges when a record is spun. This is sometimes called the problem of time in quantum physics. How can we reconcile our lived experience of time, the flow of moments, the sequence of causes and effects with a fundamental theory that does not include time at all? One suggestion is that time emerges through entanglement. Imagine the universe as a vast network of quantum systems. Individually, none of them has time. But when they interact, when one part becomes entangled with another, correlations appear. These correlations can be ordered, like frames in a film, and that ordering gives rise to what we experience as time. Time, then, is not an independent thing but a relationship, a pattern arising from the way parts of the universe connect. Another idea is that time is like temperature. Temperature is not fundamental. You will not find temperature in the equations describing individual particles. Instead, temperature emerges when you have vast numbers of particles together, when their collective motion produces a pattern we can measure. Time, by this analogy, might be the same, not fundamental to the laws, but emergent from the collective behavior of the universe. Pause for a moment and let that sink in. The seconds you feel ticking, the hours you count, the lifetimes you measure, all of them may be emergent. Not real in themselves, but real enough to beings like us who live within the pattern. To ask, what is time, at this level may be like asking, what is color, in a world of photons. Color does not exist in light itself. It emerges in the eye, in the brain, in the interpretation. Time may be the same, not in the equations of the universe, but in the experience of it. If this is true, then the implications ripple outward. If time is emergent, then it can emerge differently under different conditions. The arrow may not be fixed. The flow may not be universal. In other words, time could be engineered not only in the sense of being bent or slowed, but in the sense of being brought forth, shaped, or even withheld. The Wheeler-DeWitt equation offers us a haunting picture, a universe without time, a frozen landscape of probabilities. Within it, what we call time is like a spotlight sweeping across the scene, illuminating one frame after another, giving the illusion of motion. But the frames exist all at once, timeless. From outside, nothing moves. From inside, everything flows. This view resonates, curiously, with ancient philosophies. Mystics and sages have long spoken of timelessness as the ultimate reality, with time itself as illusion. From the Hindu concept of Maya to the Buddhist teaching of impermanence, from Plato's eternal forms to Einstein's own statement that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion, we hear echoes of the same thought. that time is not fundamental. And if time is not fundamental, then the possibility of engineering it becomes even more intriguing. Because to engineer time in this picture is not to alter a pre-existing river, but to adjust the conditions that give rise to the illusion of the river. It is like tuning the grooves of a record or altering the way a projector sweeps across film. The music changes not because the sound is altered directly, but because the conditions of emergence shift. Speculation grows here. If time emerges from entanglement, then perhaps advanced civilizations or deeper laws of physics could manipulate entanglement to create different flows of time. They could design environments where time emerges faster or slower, where arrows point in unusual directions, where causality itself becomes a tunable property. If time is emergent, then reality may already be a kind of engineered stage, with time woven into it like lighting on a set. And what does this mean for us, sitting here, breathing, listening? It means that our experience of time, as intimate and inexorable as it feels, may be a feature of perception rather than a fact of being. It may be an interface, a user experience designed by the structure of the cosmos. Like icons on a screen, time may present us with simplicity, even as the deeper code remains timeless. Perhaps that is why moments of altered perception in dreams, in meditation, under the influence of substances, or in near-death experiences can warp our sense of time so dramatically. Perhaps these states loosen our grip on the emergent framework, allowing us to glimpse the timeless substrate beneath. If so, then our very consciousness may be a collaborator in the engineering of time, shaping how it is perceived and lived. The quantum problem of time does not offer easy answers. It destabilizes more than it resolves, but it opens a door to the idea that time may not be an ultimate law but a constructed phenomenon, a door to the idea that what we call past and future may be shadows cast by deeper symmetries, a door to the thought that time may not simply exist but arise, and if it arises, it can be set, tuned, perhaps even chosen. If time is not fundamental, if it is something that arises out of deeper relationships and entanglements, then a daring possibility emerges. Time could be set up, not discovered, not endured, but arranged, like an environment, a framework, a scaffolding created to support life, thought, and story. Imagine walking into a great cathedral. The air inside is shaped by the structure, arches soaring overhead, windows guiding light into colored patterns. Acoustics designed so that a single voice can carry across the entire nave. The experience you have within that space is not accidental. It is crafted. The stones, the wood, the glass, all have been arranged so that you feel a certain way, so that you inhabit the space in a particular manner. What if time itself is like that cathedral? A crafted environment, invisible yet pervasive, shaping how reality is experienced. In this view, time is not the foundation of the cosmos but its architecture. It does not flow because it must. It flows because the conditions have been arranged for it to emerge. Like temperature arising from countless particles, like color arising from wavelengths of light, time arises from the underlying code or laws. And just as humans can adjust temperature or alter color, perhaps someone could arrange the conditions so that time emerges in a particular way. Consider again the Wheeler-DeWitt equation. Timeless at its core, in its frozen stillness there is no before or after, no sequence, no flow. Yet somehow, from that stillness, time blooms. What if that blooming is not random? What if it has been tuned so that the flow supports complexity, growth, evolution? Speculation here grows bold. Perhaps older civilizations, far beyond us in understanding, learned to shape emergent time. They may have discovered how to weave entanglement into patterns that create particular flows, setting arrows, rhythms, even loops. To such beings, engineering time would not be about building machines, but about arranging the conditions from which time itself emerges. In their hands, time could be a material, pliable and responsive. Or perhaps it is not civilizations but deeper laws, meta-laws beyond physics as we know it, that shaped emergent time. Just as the rules of mathematics seem to exist prior to any particular equation, perhaps there are rules that govern how time arises from timelessness. These rules may have been chosen, in some sense, to allow for experience. Without them, the cosmos might remain frozen, an eternal stillness with no sequence, no memory, no becoming. With them, the stillness unfolds into a story. This thought leads to an unsettling but beautiful image. That time is scaffolding. Not ultimate reality, but a framework erected so that reality could be lived. Without scaffolding, a building cannot rise. Without time, life cannot grow. Our memories, our identities, our very sense of existence depend on sequence. Without a past to remember or a future to anticipate, consciousness itself may collapse into incomprehension. Perhaps time was set up precisely to make experience possible. Let yourself imagine this for a moment. A timeless foundation, silent and still, and into it a structure is raised. A flow, an arrow, a rhythm. Suddenly, stories can unfold. Suddenly, stars can ignite, planets can cool, organisms can evolve. Suddenly, a child can be born, can grow, can remember, can dream. Suddenly, you can sit here, now, listening. Without time, none of it would happen. With time, everything happens. If this is true, then time is not only scaffolding but gift. It is the stage that allows becoming. It is the framework that makes meaning possible. And if it has been arranged, whether by civilizations older than we can imagine, or by laws deeper than physics, or by a mind beyond our comprehension, then we are participants in something intentional. We are living inside architecture. Of course, the skeptical mind resists. It says, this is projection. The laws are what they are. Time emerges because it must, not because it was designed. But even here, the question lingers. Why should time emerge at all? Why not remain in timeless stillness? Why should the frozen equation bloom into flow? To say it must is no explanation. To say it is no comfort. To consider it arranged may not be provable, but it is at least coherent. It acknowledges the strangeness rather than brushing it aside. Perhaps our own urge to design is itself a clue. Humans have always built scaffolding, temples to guide perception, calendars to structure seasons, clocks to regulate life. We shape time even as we live within it. Maybe this instinct is reflection, not invention, an echo of the greater scaffolding we inhabit. We arrange hours into work and rest, days into weeks, years into cycles, because at some level, we sense that time itself has been arranged for us. Speculation stretches further still. If time can be engineered, then perhaps it has been engineered more than once. Perhaps civilizations before us, or minds beyond ours, have adjusted its flow in ways we cannot perceive. Perhaps the very constants of reality, the speed of light, the expansion rate of the universe, the low entropy of the beginning are evidence of settings chosen, dials turned, scaffolding built. Perhaps the reason we can perceive, remember, and grow is that time was set up to support those very acts. And what does this mean for you, here, now? It means that every breath, every thought, every memory is part of a design, not a random drift, but a sequence made possible by scaffolding you did not choose. It means that your life, with all its stories and changes, is not merely floating in time, but held by it, supported by it, scaffolded by something deeper. In quiet moments, when you sense time stretching strangely, when seconds linger in awe, or collapse in crisis, perhaps you are brushing against the scaffolding. Perhaps you are glimpsing that time is not ultimate but emergent, not given but arranged. And if so, then the mystery grows tender. Time is not just what carries you forward, it is what holds you up. It is the architecture of becoming, the invisible framework within which your story is written. And whether natural or engineered, accidental or chosen, it remains the most intimate of gifts. When people first begin to imagine time as something malleable, their thoughts often drift immediately to travel. If time can bend, if it can slow and stretch, then why not move through it as we move through space? What if we could step backward into the past, forward into the future, or sideways into alternate timelines? The dream of time travel is irresistible. It appears in myths, in literature, in science fiction, and in the whispered fantasies of anyone who has ever wished for a second chance. But when we explore this dream closely, we stumble into puzzles so strange they shake our understanding of reality itself. The most famous of these puzzles is the grandfather paradox. Imagine that you build a time machine and travel back to a time before your grandfather had children. There, in a fit of impossible recklessness, you prevent him from meeting your grandmother. If that happens, you are never born. But if you are never born, then who traveled back to stop him? The paradox loops endlessly. You exist only if you do not exist. The past is changed only if it is not changed. Logic buckles, and the story collapses under its own contradictions. Another paradox is subtler, but perhaps even more unsettling: the bootstrap paradox. In this version, a traveler goes back in time carrying an object, say, a book. They give the book to a younger version of themselves, who then grows up and, years later, carries it back into the past again. The object loops endlessly, without origin. It exists, but it was never created. It is information without source, a gift from nowhere. The bootstrap paradox raises an eerie question. Can time contain loops of causality, where things exist without ever having been made? These paradoxes are entertaining as stories, but they also hint at something deeper. They suggest that time is not infinitely pliable, that it resists certain manipulations. Try to change the past in a way that unravels the conditions of your own existence, and contradiction arises. Try to insert an object into a loop without origin, and causality strains under the weight of the impossible. It is as though time contains safeguards, hidden rules that prevent it from collapsing into chaos. This is where speculation blooms. Perhaps paradoxes are not just logical curiosities, but evidence of deeper engineering. Perhaps time, whether natural or designed, has built-in limits to ensure stability. Just as a computer program contains error handling to prevent crashes, perhaps the architecture of time contains safeguards to prevent paradoxes. When a paradox threatens to arise, reality may adjust itself subtly, rewriting, branching, or preventing events to keep the flow intact. Some physicists have proposed models along these lines. One is the Novikov self-consistency principle, which suggests that time travel may be possible, but paradoxes are not. In this view, any attempt to change the past will always fold back into consistency. If you travel back and try to stop your grandfather, something will intervene to prevent it. Or your actions will turn out to have been part of history all along. Time, in this model, enforces coherence. It will not allow contradictions. Others suggest that attempts to alter the past may create new timelines instead. In this view, when you step back and interfere, you do not rewrite your own history but branch into another. The paradox is avoided because both outcomes exist, one where your grandfather lives, one where he does not. Each is real, but you can only inhabit one. This model resembles the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, where every possibility exists in parallel. But even here, there is a sense of limits. You cannot overwrite reality. You can only add new branches. Whether through consistency or branching, the lesson is the same. Time contains rules. It is not infinitely plastic. It resists certain contradictions. It behaves as though it has been engineered to preserve coherence, to prevent instability. Speculation takes this further. If time was indeed engineered, then perhaps these rules are deliberate safeguards. Imagine creating a simulation with adjustable time. Without safeguards, contradictions would quickly arise. Objects looping without origin, events erasing themselves, causality unraveling. To prevent collapse, you would program limits. You would forbid paradoxes. You would enforce consistency or branching, ensuring that the system remained stable. Could our paradoxes be glimpses of such programming, signs that time's architecture was designed with guardrails? Consider how strange this makes our position. On the one hand, we dream of mastering time, of traveling freely through its flow. On the other, we sense that we are contained within rules we cannot break. We long to touch the past, to rewrite the story, but every attempt, whether in thought experiments, fiction, or physics, confronts the same barrier: paradox. The paradox is not just a puzzle, it is a wall that suggests design. Pause for a moment and let your imagination wander. Picture time as a great labyrinth, its passages twisting and turning. Within it, you walk forward, step by step, unable to turn back. But suppose you find a door, a hidden passage that seems to allow backward travel. You step through, only to discover that the labyrinth rearranges itself, ensuring that your journey remains consistent. The paradox is prevented not because you failed, but because the labyrinth itself is engineered to forbid contradiction. This thought resonates with something intimate in human life. We all know the wish to undo, to go back, to change a choice, to prevent a loss. But we also know the impossibility of it. We cannot rewrite our past. We can only move forward, carrying the weight of what has been. Perhaps paradoxes are not just logical barriers, but reflections of this truth. Perhaps time has been arranged so that life must be lived forward, so that memory is one way, so that becoming is irreversible. If that is so, then the paradoxes are not failures of imagination but confirmations of design. They tell us that time is not a chaotic free-for-all, but a structured system, engineered to preserve story. And in that structure, there may be meaning. So when we encounter the grandfather paradox or the bootstrap paradox, we are not only confronting puzzles, we are glimpsing the architecture of time itself, an architecture that seems to resist contradiction, to preserve coherence, to hold us within a flow that is both mysterious and strangely stable. And perhaps, just perhaps, that stability is no accident. In the language of physics, time is not always the straight arrow we feel it to be. General relativity, Einstein's great theory of gravity, describes space and time as a fabric, one that can bend, twist, and fold under the influence of mass and energy. And when this fabric bends far enough, strange possibilities emerge. Among them is one of the most haunting: the closed time-like curve. A closed time-like curve is, in essence, a loop in time. Imagine walking forward through space, step after step, only to find that your path brings you back to where you started. Now imagine the same, not in space, but in time. You move forward through moments, one after another, only to return to the moment you began. In such a loop, yesterday and tomorrow merge, and the distinction between past and future dissolves. Einstein's equations allow for such curves under certain extreme conditions. Near rotating black holes, for instance, the immense warping of space-time may permit paths that circle not only in space but in time. Solutions to the equations, such as the Gödel metric, discovered by the logician Kurt Gödel, describe universes in which closed time-like curves exist naturally, where time loops endlessly upon itself. If relativity permits them, why do we not see them? Why does our world seem stubbornly linear, its arrow unbroken? Why does every attempt to step into the past confront us with paradox instead of opportunity? Some argue that closed time-like curves may exist, but only in conditions far beyond our reach, deep inside black holes or in exotic universes unlike our own. Others suggest that while the equations allow them, reality enforces a stricter rule, forbidding their manifestation. Stephen Hawking famously proposed a chronology protection conjecture, suggesting that the laws of physics conspire to prevent time loops from arising, shielding the universe from paradox. In his words, the universe is safe for historians. But what if this protection is not merely a natural consequence but a safeguard? What if the absence of observable time loops is evidence that time has been engineered to forbid them? Think of it like this. If you were designing a simulation, you would want it to remain stable. Loops in causality effects, becoming their own causes, events without origin would destabilize the system, leading to contradictions and crashes. To prevent this, you would build in rules that prohibit such loops from forming. You might allow the equations to gesture toward them hints of possibility, glimpses of what could be, but you would not permit them to unfold in the lived reality of the system. They would remain mathematical phantoms, never physical events. This is exactly what we observe. The mathematics of relativity tells us that closed time-like curves are possible, but the universe we inhabit seems to exclude them. Black holes exist, but their interiors are veiled behind horizons we cannot cross. Exotic solutions to the equations exist on paper, but not in our sky. It is as though the code permits the idea, but the architecture prevents the execution. Speculation blooms here. Could it be that closed time-like curves are deliberately hidden, that the fabric of time is engineered to allow the concept but not the practice, the mathematics but not the manifestation? If so, then paradoxes are not accidents avoided, but contradictions actively prevented by design. This possibility offers a strange comfort. If time loops were accessible, our reality might dissolve into incoherence. Cause and effect would blur, memory would lose meaning, history would fragment into contradictions. The fact that we live in a world where stories can be told, where events follow one another, where life unfolds in sequence, may depend on the absence of these loops. The safeguard may not only protect the universe from paradox, it may protect consciousness from disintegration. Imagine, for a moment, what it would mean to live inside a loop. You wake each morning, not to a new day, but to the same day returning endlessly. Your memories align with your actions, but your actions circle back to where they began. The loop is complete, perfect, and meaningless. Without direction, without novelty, experience collapses. Life becomes repetition without progress, story without change. Perhaps closed time-like curves are forbidden not simply because they threaten physics, but because they threaten meaning itself. This thought carries us back to myth. Many cultures warned against cycles that trap rather than liberate. In Buddhism, the wheel of samsara represents endless rebirth, a cycle to be transcended. In Greek myth, Sisyphus pushes his stone endlessly, trapped in repetition. In these stories, the loop is not salvation but imprisonment. Perhaps the absence of closed time-like curves in our world reflects a similar truth. Perhaps time has been engineered not to imprison us in loops, but to carry us forward, granting us the gift of change. Still, the mathematics lingers, whispering that loops are possible. And this duality, possible in principle, absent in practice, may itself be a clue. It suggests that our universe is not a free-for-all, but a carefully balanced structure, one that hints at what might be but enforces what must be. It permits imagination while forbidding contradiction. It allows the equations to sketch loops but ensures that we never stumble into them. If this is so, then perhaps closed time-like curves are less an absence and more a boundary. They show us the edge of the system, the place where possibility brushes against design. They remind us that time is not infinitely malleable, that it has guardrails, that its flow is maintained by something deeper than equations alone. And so, when we contemplate time loops, we are not only entertaining science fiction or abstract mathematics. We are confronting the architecture of time itself, an architecture that seems to protect itself from collapse, to guard its arrow against paradox, to hold its stories in coherence. Whether by natural law or deliberate design, the result is the same. We live in a universe where time flows forward, where loops remain hidden, where meaning is preserved. Perhaps then, the absence of closed time-like curves is not a disappointment but a gift, a sign that time, however strange, is structured for life, for consciousness, for story. A sign that safeguards have been built into the very fabric of reality, ensuring that we move not in circles but in journeys. If time is the architecture within which existence unfolds, then clocks are its visible ornaments, markers that remind us of its rhythm, signatures of its flow. In our daily lives, we carry time on our wrists, hang it on our walls, embed it in our devices. But long before human beings crafted watches and calendars, the universe itself was already filled with clocks. Consider the pulsar. These are neutron stars, the dense remnants of massive stars that exploded as supernovae. Though only a dozen kilometers across, they hold more mass than our sun. And they spin with astonishing regularity, beaming radiation like a cosmic lighthouse. Each rotation sends out a pulse that can be detected across space, ticking with a precision that rivals even our finest atomic clocks. Some pulsars are so stable that astronomers use them to measure cosmic distances, to detect gravitational waves, to anchor the very calendar of the cosmos. Then there are orbital cycles. The Earth circles the Sun once each year, the Moon circles the Earth once each month, the planet spins once each day. These cycles have been our most ancient timekeepers, guiding agriculture, ritual, and story. The seasons turn, the tides rise and fall, shadows lengthen and shorten. To live on Earth is to live inside these rhythms, to be carried by clocks that need no gears or batteries, clocks written into the mechanics of the cosmos itself. At a deeper scale, atoms themselves keep time. Their electrons vibrate at precise frequencies, transitions that are so stable we have harnessed them as our most accurate clocks. Atomic time has become the standard by which we measure seconds, coordinate satellites, and synchronize our global networks. But notice the pattern here. Whether pulsars or planets or atoms, the universe seems filled with natural timekeepers, each ticking in its own way, yet all woven into the same grand rhythm. This abundance of clocks raises a curious question. Why should the universe contain so many? Why should matter and motion, at every scale, produce regular rhythms? From atoms to stars, from galaxies to the spin of Earth, the cosmos seems intent on marking time. It is as though reality itself insists on synchrony, on rhythm, on keeping track. Speculation finds fertile ground here. Could it be that these natural clocks were placed, deliberately or by deeper law, to synchronize reality? Imagine designing a system. You would want consistency. You would want processes to unfold in harmony, to remain coherent across vast distances. You might seed the system with natural oscillators, stable pulses, predictable cycles, repeating rhythms so that the system remains in sync. This is exactly what we see. Pulsars tick with uncanny precision. Atoms vibrate with unwavering frequency. Planets circle steadily, year after year. The universe is not random chaos. It is filled with order, repetition, rhythm. Some might say this is simply the consequence of physics. Matter spins because of angular momentum. Atoms vibrate because of quantum rules. Planets orbit because of gravity. But this explanation only pushes the question deeper. Why do the rules produce such clocks at all? Why should the laws of physics give rise to rhythms instead of randomness? Why should time be filled with markers rather than blank? Perhaps the answer lies in stability. Without regular rhythms, coherence would dissolve. Without cycles, life would lack the scaffolding of seasons. Without vibrations, matter itself would lack stability. Clocks are not optional, they are necessary. And yet, necessity does not erase the possibility of design. Indeed, it often sharpens it. If the system requires clocks, then perhaps the clocks were placed to ensure the system's stability. Think again of pulsars. To us, they are distant and strange, the corpses of dead stars. But to an engineer of time, they would be perfect beacons, stable, precise, cosmic lighthouses that keep reality in order. It is no accident that we, too, have used them as navigation tools, as anchors for measuring the universe. Perhaps we have stumbled upon their true purpose, not simply remnants of stellar death, but timekeepers of the cosmos. Or consider the atomic clock. We pride ourselves on inventing it, but in truth, we only borrowed from nature. The vibrations of cesium atoms existed long before we measured them. We did not create the frequency, we only discovered it. The atoms were already ticking, already keeping time with extraordinary precision. It is as though the universe had embedded clocks at every level, waiting for us to notice. Speculation stretches further. What if synchronization is not just convenience but necessity for consciousness itself? To form memory, to build identity, to tell story, we need consistent rhythm. Without stable timekeepers, perception would dissolve into noise. Perhaps the clocks of the universe exist not only for physical stability but also for experiential stability, so that beings like us can live within time as story rather than chaos. Pause for a moment and look around your world. The clock on your wall, the ticking in your phone, the beating of your heart, the rising of the sun. These are not separate. They are harmonized. They participate in a grand synchrony that allows you to measure, to anticipate, to remember. Without it, your life would lose coherence. With it, you live inside rhythm, carried by a music you did not compose. And here lies the speculation that edges toward wonder. Could it be that the cosmos itself is an orchestrated symphony of timekeepers? Could it be that pulsars and atoms, orbits and vibrations, were arranged or at least permitted to provide not just structure, but harmony? Perhaps reality itself is a clockwork, not mechanical but cosmic, designed to tick steadily enough to sustain meaning. If so, then every natural clock is both a marker and a message, a reminder that time is not empty, but ordered, that rhythm is not incidental, but fundamental. And perhaps that order whispers of something beyond necessity, of an architecture deeper than we yet understand. When human beings first looked to the sky, they did not see randomness. They saw rhythm. The stars wheeled overhead in steady procession. The moon swelled and waned in predictable phases. The sun returned each morning and drifted across the horizon in patterns that repeated with uncanny precision. For ancient peoples, the heavens were not only mysteries, they were clocks. Across the world, civilizations built monuments that aligned with these celestial rhythms. At Stonehenge in England, massive stones were positioned so that on the summer solstice, the rising sun would appear directly over the heel stone, bathing the circle in light. Thousands of miles away in the Yucatan, the Maya constructed El Castillo, the Great Pyramid of Chichen Itza, in such a way that on the equinox, shadows form the shape of a serpent descending the staircase. In Egypt, the pyramids are aligned with Orion's belt, as though the builders were inscribing stellar order onto the earth. Why such obsession? Why devote generations of labor to aligning stone with sky? The answer lies in time. These monuments were calendars, anchoring human life to cosmic rhythm. The solstices marked seasons for planting and harvest. The equinoxes aligned festivals and rituals. The stars told when to travel, when to prepare, when to remember. By fixing monuments to the heavens, ancient peoples synchronized themselves with the universe's great clocks. It is striking how universal this impulse was. From the ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the medicine wheels of North America, from the Nabta Playa stones in the Sahara to the observatories of ancient China, humanity everywhere built calendars in stone. They did not simply mark days on parchment, they carved them into the earth itself, ensuring that the rhythm of time was embodied, visible, undeniable. This reveals something profound. Humans did not invent the measurement of time. They discovered it. They sensed that the universe was already ordered, already keeping time, already synchronized. Their monuments were not impositions of rhythm onto chaos, but recognitions of rhythm within order. They were aligning themselves with something greater. Speculation grows here. Could it be that this universal impulse to measure, to align, to mark time is itself evidence that humans intuitively sense the engineered order of time? Imagine, for a moment, that you are part of a designed environment. You may not know its architect, but you can feel its structure. The rhythms seep into you, the rising and setting of the sun, the swelling of the moon, the turning of the seasons. You respond instinctively, building rituals, aligning stones, synchronizing life with the cosmic beat. You do this not out of superstition, but because you sense, however dimly, that the rhythm is real. Perhaps this is why every civilization, however distant, turned its gaze to the heavens and built calendars. Perhaps they were not merely practical farmers measuring seasons, but participants in a greater order, drawn to align themselves with the architecture of time. Their monuments stand not only as tools of agriculture but as acts of reverence, acknowledgements that the universe is not random drift but structured rhythm. Notice, too, how the calendars often carried spiritual weight. Solstices were not just practical markers, they were sacred events. The return of the sun at midwinter was celebrated as rebirth. The equinox was honored as balance. The heavens were not simply observed but worshipped, as though the rhythms themselves were divine. Perhaps this reverence reflects an intuition that time, with its precision and order, is not merely natural but crafted, a gift bestowed rather than a rule endured. Even today, in our digital world, we remain bound to these rhythms. We celebrate the new year as the Earth completes its orbit. We honor birthdays as the sun returns to its place in the sky. We plant and harvest by the turning of seasons. Satellites and atomic clocks may now keep time for us, but they are descendants of older calendars, more precise but no less dependent on cosmic rhythm. We still live inside the calendar of the cosmos, even if we no longer build pyramids to mark it. Speculation stretches further. If time was engineered, then perhaps the clocks we see in the heavens, solstices, equinoxes, lunar cycles, stellar alignments are part of the design. Perhaps they are the visible gears of the system, the cosmic hands of a clock built to synchronize not only physics but experience. And perhaps humanity's obsession with measuring and marking them is evidence that we are attuned to the architecture. We may not know who wound the clock, but we hear its ticking, and we cannot help but count. This thought transforms how we view ancient monuments. They are not merely relics of superstition, nor only tools of farming, but possible responses to a real, engineered order. They are humanity's attempt to mirror the architecture of time, to inscribe on earth what was already written in the sky. So when you picture Stonehenge, or the pyramids, or the serpent shadow of Chichen Itza, do not see only stones and shadows. See a species listening to the rhythm of the cosmos, aligning itself to the clockwork of time. See an intuition of design, a recognition, however dim, that time is not random drift but ordered flow. And perhaps, just perhaps, those ancient builders were not wrong. Perhaps they felt, in ways we have almost forgotten, that time is not only measured but given. If the cosmos provides its great clocks in stars and atoms, there is another, more intimate clock that shapes our lives. the human mind. For all the precision of pulsars and atomic oscillations, it is our consciousness that gives time its lived texture. Seconds, minutes, hours. These are not just measured by instruments, they are felt, and how we feel them can be radically different from how they are measured. The brain does not experience time as a steady tick. It stretches and contracts, slows and quickens, depending on mood, circumstance, and state of awareness. A single moment of crisis can expand into what feels like an eternity, every detail seared into memory. Hours of routine can vanish in a blur, scarcely noticed. Childhood summers seemed endless, while adult years vanish in a blink. Time, for consciousness, is elastic. Neuroscientists have studied this elasticity with fascination. They find that our perception of time is tied to attention and memory. When we are fully immersed, when every detail is vivid, the brain encodes more information, and time feels slower. When we drift through habit, the brain records less, and time collapses. In this way, time as we perceive it is not absolute, but a construction of the mind, shaped by how we attend to the world. Altered states of consciousness make this even clearer. Under the influence of psychedelics, many report that time dissolves altogether. Minutes feel like hours, or hours feel like moments. Some describe stepping outside of time, experiencing eternity in a single breath. Meditation can have similar effects. Deep states of focus can stretch seconds into vast spaciousness or dissolve the sense of sequence altogether. Mystical experiences, whether religious or secular, often carry the same theme: timelessness. Even dreams warp time. We wake from a dream that felt like hours, only to find that minutes have passed. The brain, freed from the external anchors of clocks and sunlight, invents its own tempo. In this dream time, events compress and expand without regard to physics. Consciousness itself becomes the timekeeper, shaping duration from within. What does this tell us? At the very least, it shows that time as we experience it is not fixed, not objective. It is subjective, biological, constructed. Our sense of time is an interface, a way the brain organizes change into story, and this opens a speculative door. If our experience of time is constructed, then who or what constructed it? Is it merely an accident of evolution, or is it part of the deeper architecture? Think of it like this: for life to have meaning, for consciousness to build identity, memory is required, and memory requires sequence. Without a sense of before and after, without the ability to distinguish past from present, the self dissolves. To be conscious is to experience time. Perhaps our perception of time is not just a byproduct of biology, but a feature tuned to make consciousness possible. Speculation stretches further. If time itself is emergent, if it arises from entanglement and relationships at the quantum level, then perhaps consciousness is one of the engines that brings it. Fourth, perhaps our subjective perception is not merely shaped by time, but helps to shape it. In altered states, when perception loosens, perhaps we glimpse the scaffolding beneath the timeless substrate out of which time arises. This would explain why mystical traditions across cultures speak of liberation from time. Buddhist meditation points toward the eternal now. Christian mystics speak of entering eternity in moments of union. Shamans describe journeys outside of ordinary time, where ancestors and spirits dwell. These are not just metaphors. They may be reflections of consciousness brushing against the edges of its own time-constructing machinery. Pause for a moment and notice your own perception. The words you are hearing now unfold in sequence, one after another, but your awareness gathers them into a continuous flow. That flow feels natural, inevitable. And yet it is your brain that stitches it together, your consciousness that constructs the continuity. You are not passively experiencing time, you are actively weaving it. If this is so, then our experience of time may be less about enduring an external river and more about participating in an internal construction. We do not simply ride the current, we help generate it. Time, for us, is not only cosmic but personal. Speculation deepens here. If consciousness constructs time, then perhaps the flow of time has been engineered not only at the cosmic level, but at the biological and cognitive level. Perhaps our brains evolved, or were tuned to perceive time in precisely the way that allows us to live, to grow, to tell stories. Too fast, and life would blur into incomprehension. Too slow, and life would stagnate. The tempo of our perception may itself be a parameter, tuned as delicately as the constants of physics. And if that is the case, then every heartbeat, every memory, every sense of duration may carry the trace of design. So the question arises, is time something we experience or something we create? Is it a backdrop or is it an interface, engineered for minds like ours? Perhaps it is both. The cosmos provides its great rhythms, pulsars, orbits, oscillations. Consciousness provides its inner rhythms, attention, memory, narrative. Together, they weave the fabric of lived time, a fabric that feels seamless but is, in truth, constructed. And perhaps that construction, both cosmic and cognitive, is no accident. Perhaps it is part of a larger architecture, one that allows life to exist, story to unfold, and meaning to arise. If the brain shapes time subjectively, then mystical traditions suggest something more radical still. That beyond the mind's construction, there is a deeper field of awareness in which time dissolves altogether. For thousands of years, seekers, mystics, and sages have spoken of timelessness as the ultimate state, not simply slower time, not merely stretched or compressed, but an existence beyond the sequence of moments. Consider the testimonies of meditation masters. In states of profound absorption, time can vanish. Hours pass in what feels like minutes, or minutes stretch into eternity. The usual sense of past, present, and future is replaced by a boundless now. Buddhist traditions describe this as entry into the Dharmakaya, the timeless body of truth. In Hinduism, it is the glimpse of Brahman, the eternal reality beyond change. In Christian mysticism, it appears as union with God, the eternal presence where time no longer binds. Shamanic traditions, too, describe journeys outside of ordinary time. In trance states, shamans meet ancestors long dead or encounter events not yet born. Time, for them, is not linear but layered, accessible in different ways of awareness. The Mayan cosmology spoke of ages and cycles repeating, yet shamans could step into the eternal realm from which those cycles arise. Modern reports echo the same theme. Near-death experiences often include a sense of timelessness. Individuals describe their lives flashing before them in an instant, or entering a realm where past and future are meaningless. Psychedelic journeys frequently dissolve the normal flow of time, replacing it with eternal presence. Across cultures and experiences, the pattern repeats. At the edges of consciousness, time melts away. What do we make of this? From a scientific perspective, we can say that the brain's construction of time has loosened. Neural networks that generate sequence and narrative have shifted, and so the flow of time collapses. But from another perspective, one rooted in philosophy and speculation, perhaps these states reveal something deeper. Perhaps time, as we live it, is an interface designed for minds like ours. And perhaps in altered states, we glimpse the field beneath the interface, a timeless awareness that underlies experience. Think of a computer screen. The icons and windows present a user interface, simple and accessible. Behind them lies code, processes, circuits, electricity. The user never sees those directly. They interact only with the interface. But sometimes, a glitch reveals the code. A flicker exposes the structure beneath. Could time be similar? Our ordinary consciousness provides the interface of flowing moments. Mystical states peel back the interface, revealing awareness itself, timeless, boundless, unconditioned. If this is so, then perhaps time was designed as a kind of filter, a way of structuring experience so that finite beings could live, grow, and learn within it. Without time, awareness might be infinite but incomprehensible, too vast for individual minds to grasp. With time, experience is sequenced into story, digestible and meaningful. Time may be the operating system of consciousness, tuned not for ultimate truth but for livable reality. Speculation stretches even further. What if consciousness itself is not merely shaped by time, but participates in its engineering? Perhaps time is not only an external field into which awareness steps, but also a field arising from awareness. Mystics often speak of timeless awareness as the ground of being from which all phenomena arise. If so, then time could be the way awareness organizes itself into story. Consciousness, in this view, is not trapped in time, it is the source of time. This thought transforms everything. It means that the ticking of clocks, the turning of planets, the oscillations of atoms, all may be secondary expressions of a deeper truth. That time emerges wherever awareness begins to weave sequence. The cosmos itself may be conscious, and its rhythms may be the stories it tells itself. In this sense, time would not be engineered by some external architect, but by awareness itself, endlessly shaping its own flow. Pause here and notice your own awareness. Beneath the flow of thoughts, beneath the memory of past and the anticipation of future, there is simply presence, a field in which all experience arises. That field does not age, it does not move, it does not measure, and yet within it, time unfolds. Perhaps that presence is the true engineer, and time is the scaffolding it creates so that story can exist. This resonates with both science and spirituality. Physics tells us that time may be emergent, not fundamental. Mysticism tells us that timeless awareness is the ground of being. Between them lies a possibility, that time is a construct within awareness, tuned for experience, engineered by consciousness itself. Speculation blooms further still. Could it be that each consciousness engineers its own time, weaving sequence uniquely? This might explain why subjective time varies so dramatically, why a child's summer feels endless, why a moment of awe expands, why years collapse into memory. Perhaps each of us carries a personal clock, engineered not mechanically but experientially. And perhaps the collective flow of time we share, the agreed-upon seconds and hours, is a synchronization of many consciousnesses weaving together. If this is true, then the architecture of time is not only cosmic and biological, but also experiential. It is built from the ground of awareness itself, arising anew in each observer, each life. And the universality of mystical timelessness suggests that, beneath these individual constructions, there lies a deeper field, one awareness, infinite and timeless, from which all time flows. So we arrive at a startling possibility. Time may not only have been engineered for us, we may be, ourselves, the engineers. Each mind, each moment of awareness, participates in the weaving of sequence. And behind all those weavings lies the field of timeless consciousness, vast, silent, eternal. Perhaps this is what the mystics have always tried to tell us. That time is both real and unreal, both gift and illusion, that beneath its flow lies awareness, and that awareness is the true ground. Perhaps time was not simply given to us, perhaps we are co-creators of it, weaving it moment by moment, story by story, within the field of timeless being. To suggest that time can be engineered is to open a door into a reality both exhilarating and unsettling. For if time is not absolute but pliable, not given but arranged, then every field of human thought, science, philosophy. Religion must reorient itself. We would no longer be passive passengers on the river of time, but architects of its flow. From the standpoint of science, the consequences would be staggering. Physics has always sought the bedrock of reality. Once it was atoms, then fields, then quanta of information. If time itself is discovered to be programmable, it would mean the ultimate constants of reality are less laws than settings. The laboratory of the future might no longer merely measure seconds. It might stretch or compress them at will. Biologists could imagine slowing time inside a single cell to watch the dance of proteins in exquisite detail, or speeding evolutionary processes by compressing centuries of mutation into days. Chemists could accelerate reactions by tuning the tempo of time in a flask. Spacefaring missions might create time bubbles, where months for the traveler equate to millennia outside, allowing us to cross cosmic distances without leaving our own lifetime behind. But technology is only the surface of the change. At its core lies a philosophical upheaval. Philosophy has long wrestled with the tension between free will and determinism. If the past is fixed, then all our choices are bound by causality. If the future is open, then freedom exists. But if time can be engineered, then causality itself becomes adjustable. The past may not be an immutable story, but a revisable archive. The future may not be a fate waiting to unfold, but a canvas waiting to be painted. The present may not be a single instant, but a branching field of possibilities, any of which could be chosen by those who control the flow. In such a reality, freedom would mean not only the ability to act within time, but the ability to shape time itself. This shift would ripple into religion, where time has always been sacred. In Abrahamic traditions, time is linear, a story with a beginning, guided by divine will, moving toward an end. In Hinduism and Buddhism, time is cyclical, a wheel of rebirth and dissolution. If humanity learns to engineer time, then the sacred task once reserved for gods, the shaping of time's flow, would become a human endeavor. Some might see this as confirmation of myth, a sign that we are growing into the role of co-creators with the divine. Others might see it as hubris, a trespass into realms too vast for mortals to govern. Either way, theology would be reshaped. Eternity itself might no longer be something we endure, but something we design. Now imagine the arrival of time engineers, future humans or post-humans, who have learned to master these principles. What would life look like for them? A historian could do more than study the past. They could enter it, alter it, weave new narratives. A futurist could do more than forecast trends. They could select which timeline to inhabit. Everyday experience would shift. One might slow time to savor a moment of beauty, stretch a kiss into an hour, or compress an ordeal into seconds. Time would become a medium of art as much as paint or sound, sculpted and tuned to create experiences. Yet such power would not come without danger. To engineer time would be to risk destabilizing it. Paradoxes, loops, contradictions, all would threaten coherence. Perhaps this is why our present universe resists them so fiercely, why paradoxes remain theoretical but never actual. The architecture of time may already contain safeguards, not just against collapse, but against premature tampering. If so, then humanity's evolution into time engineers will require not only knowledge but wisdom, the maturity to shape time without unraveling meaning. Pause here and consider what this implies for us now. Already, in small ways, we do engineer time. We extend lifespans with medicine. We manipulate perception with drugs and meditation. We synchronize global civilization with atomic clocks and satellites. These are the first steps, crude compared to what may come. But they hint at a trajectory, from measuring time to bending it, to one day designing it. The implications are dizzying. If time can be engineered, then history itself is malleable. If history is malleable, then so is identity. What does it mean to be human if your past can be revised? your future selected, your present sculpted. What becomes of morality when actions can be undone or rewritten? What becomes of memory when yesterday might shift depending on today's choice? What becomes of meaning when the story itself is editable? And yet, perhaps the deepest implication is this: if time can be engineered, then so can hope. For in such a reality, no loss would be final, no tragedy irrevocable, no ending absolute. Time itself could be reopened, reshaped, relived. The arrow would no longer pierce only forward but could bend, loop, or blossom into branches. We would not only endure the architecture of time, we would begin to build it ourselves. Before imagining what humanity might one day accomplish, we must pause to ask a quieter, perhaps more haunting question. What if the work has already been done? What if the flow of time we inhabit, the arrow of entropy, the consistency of causality, the rhythm of seconds is not natural at all, but engineered long before us? If so, then we are not future time architects but tenants in a structure already designed, inhabitants of a vast time architecture that holds our every thought and action. Look again at the arrow of time. Physics tells us that the equations governing particles are reversible. They work just as well backward as forward. Yet reality itself flows in only one direction, from past to future, from order to disorder, from memory to anticipation. Why should this be so? Why should the universe have begun in a state of astonishingly low entropy, primed for the arrow to exist? Many physicists admit it is one of the great mysteries, the improbable initial condition from which all time's flow arises. But if time was engineered, then this mystery may not be coincidence. It may be the mark of a setting chosen, a parameter fixed to ensure that reality unfolds with coherence. Causality, too, may not be as natural as it seems. Our experience depends on cause leading to effect, one event birthing the next. Yet nothing in the equations of physics demands causality in the way we live it. Quantum mechanics even hints at violations effects appearing before their causes. Particles influencing one another outside of time's normal order. And yet, on the scale of human life, causality holds firm. We can trust that a match lights after the strike, that a word spoken precedes its echo, that birth comes before death. This reliability may be another sign of engineering, the rules of time tuned so that story, memory, and meaning can exist without collapse. Consider, too, the constants of reality. The Planck time, the smallest possible unit of duration, is a setting that defines the granularity of time itself. Why this unit and not another? The speed of light sets the maximum pace at which information and causality can travel. Why that value, delicately balanced between chaos and stagnation? To many, these appear as accidents of physics. But to view them as parameters in a design changes the picture. They are not accidents, but dials, tuned so that a coherent universe could emerge. If this is true, then the entire structure of reality resembles a vast machine. Its gears are entropy, causality, constants, cycles. Its architecture is tuned not for randomness but for coherence, not for chaos but for story. And we, living within it, are like characters inhabiting a cathedral we did not build, marveling at the light without realizing that the windows were placed to guide it. Speculation stretches further still. If time has already been engineered, then who or what engineered it? Was it the work of some unimaginable intelligence, a civilization far older and greater than our own? Was it the product of deeper laws beyond our physics, the scaffolding of a multiverse in which each universe's time is set differently? Or is it consciousness itself, timeless awareness arranging the flow to make story possible? We cannot know, but we can reflect on what this would mean for us. If time is already engineered, then our reality is not arbitrary. The arrow of time, the persistence of causality, the steady flow of seconds, These are not just facts of existence, but features of design. We are living in a world tuned like an instrument, a universe configured like a machine, a reality framed by a time architecture that ensures coherence. Pause and let that thought settle. Every memory you hold, every anticipation of tomorrow, every rhythm of your body and mind, all are possible because of this architecture. You are not merely floating in time. You are held by it, carried by it, synchronized within it. Time is not an accident. It is a framework, invisible yet omnipresent, guiding your story moment by moment. And perhaps that framework carries intention. Perhaps the reason time feels meaningful is because it was shaped to be so. Perhaps the reason we can live stories, grow, change, and remember is because time was set to allow it. The architecture may not only support physics, it may support meaning itself. If this is the case, then the deepest question is not whether humanity will one day engineer time, but whether we already live in an engineered time. To recognize this possibility is to shift our perspective, from would-be architects to grateful participants, from builders of the future to inhabitants of a design vast beyond imagining. And in that recognition lies a quiet wonder, for if time was indeed engineered, then every second, even this one, carries the imprint of intention. If time carries the imprint of intention, then its architecture may not be purely benevolent. To live within a designed framework is also to live within limits. What feels like order may also be confinement. The arrow that guides us forward may also be a chain that prevents us from stepping aside. To see time as engineered is to open the possibility that it was not only built as a gift but also as a prison. Consider the linearity of time. We are carried inexorably from birth to death, never able to pause, rewind, or step outside the flow. Our memories hold only the past, never the future. Our choices shape only forward branches, never backward corrections. This one-way motion is the essence of causality, the bedrock of meaning, but it is also a cage. For who among us has not wished to go back? To undo, to relive, to restore, time forbids it. The architecture is absolute. Myths across cultures reflect this unease. The Greeks told of Kronos, devourer of his children, a god whose very nature was to consume. In Buddhism, the endless wheel of samsara was a cycle of bondage, trapping beings in repetition until they attained liberation. In Norse mythology, the end of time, Ragnarok, was inevitable, a fate that no god or mortal could escape. Even in modern imagination, time is often pictured as a tyrant, dragging us forward against our will. These myths do not merely describe time, they describe captivity. Speculation blooms here. What if the linearity of time is not a natural law but an imposed constraint? What if time was engineered not only to support life but to bind it? Imagine designing a system where inhabitants could never tamper with history, never step outside causality, never destabilize the flow. To ensure stability, you might impose limits, memory restricted to the past, anticipation restricted to the future, freedom confined to the present moment. From within, those limits would feel natural, inevitable. But from outside, they would be revealed as safeguards. This transforms how we see our condition. Perhaps our inability to revisit the past is not simply physics but design. Perhaps our mortality, our fleeting moments, our irreversibility, all are features of the architecture, not flaws. Perhaps the very frustration we feel with time's linearity is evidence that we are bound. Philosophers have long debated whether freedom is possible in a determined universe, but in a designed time, the question sharpens. Freedom may exist, but only within the cage. We are free to choose within the present, but we cannot step outside the flow itself. Our lives are written within parameters we did not set. And yet, myths also speak of liberation. The Buddha is said to have seen through the wheel of time, entering nirvana beyond birth and death. Christian mystics spoke of eternity, a state outside the flow of temporal suffering. Shamans journeyed beyond ordinary time to realms where ancestors and spirits dwelled. These stories suggest that the cage may not be absolute or that glimpses of freedom are possible from within. Perhaps altered states of consciousness, where time loosens its grip, are cracks in the prison walls. Perhaps dreams, where past and future mingle, are temporary escapes. Perhaps mystical timelessness is not fantasy but memory, a trace of awareness beyond the architecture. If so, then the prison of time is not unbreakable, but carefully maintained, allowing only rare glimpses of what lies beyond. Speculation stretches further. If time was engineered as a cage, then why? Was it to protect us from paradox, to keep the universe coherent? Was it to guide us through growth, ensuring we could learn from mistakes rather than erase them? Or was it for reasons more enigmatic, beyond our comprehension, to contain us, to test us, to bind us for some larger purpose? The thought is unsettling. To imagine time as a prison is to question the meaning of our own existence. Are we free, or are we bound? Are we participants in a grand story, or captives within a system built to constrain us? Pause and feel this tension. Each second that passes is both a gift and a loss, both a moment of life and a step closer to death. Time gives meaning, but it also takes freedom. It allows story, but it also enforces finality. And if it was engineered, then the prison is not an accident. It was built, carefully and deliberately, around us. Yet perhaps even prisons can be purposeful. A cage can be cruelty, but it can also be protection, keeping fledglings safe until they can fly. Perhaps our captivity within linear time is temporary, a stage in evolution. Perhaps the very limits that frustrate us are training, scaffolding for beings who may one day step beyond them. If so, then time as prison is not the end of the story, but a chapter. And even as we feel bound, we may also be preparing for freedom. If one perspective paints time as a cage, another sees it as the very condition that makes existence meaningful. For without time, nothing could grow, nothing could change, nothing could unfold into story. What feels like confinement from one angle may, from another, be seen as a gift, a framework that allows beauty, struggle, and transformation to exist at all. Think for a moment of a seed buried in the soil. Without time, it would never sprout, never stretch toward the light, never unfurl into leaf and blossom. Think of a child who would never grow into language, laughter, wisdom, or love without the unfolding of years. Think of a symphony, which would collapse into noise if every note played at once. It is time that creates sequence, that permits development, that turns chaos into narrative. Without it, there would be no journey, only a static whole. In this sense, time may be less a prison than a stage. It gives us beginnings and endings, and in between, it gives us the chance to become. The arrow that carries us forward is also the thread that stitches our lives into story. To be bound by time is also to be blessed by it, to have the chance to live, to learn, to love, to lose, and to find meaning in the cycle of change. Philosophers have often remarked on this paradox. Augustine wondered what time was, admitting he knew until he tried to explain it. Yet he recognized that without time, there could be no history, no creation, no salvation. Kierkegaard saw time as the condition of human existence, the very thing that makes freedom, choice, and faith possible. Without temporality, we would not be human at all. We would be static, unchanging, lifeless. Religious traditions, too, have treated time as sacred gift. In the Hebrew scriptures, time begins with creation itself. There was evening, and there was morning the first day. Time is marked, blessed, and hallowed. The Sabbath becomes holy precisely because it sanctifies the rhythm of days. In Buddhism, though time can be bondage, it also offers the path to liberation. Without cycles of rebirth, there could be no progress toward enlightenment. Even the Mayan calendar, so often misunderstood as a doomsday prophecy, was in truth a celebration of cycles, the turning of ages, the renewal of worlds. Speculation arises here. What if time was engineered precisely for meaning? What if the linear flow, the arrow of entropy, the rhythm of cycles were not arbitrary but carefully arranged so that story could exist? In a timeless cosmos, all would be simultaneous, no change, no becoming, no hope. But in a time-structured cosmos, beings can emerge, evolve, and discover. The very limits that frustrate us, mortality, irreversibility, the forward march may be the same limits that allow beauty and purpose to blossom. Imagine, for a moment, life without time. Every moment collapsed into one. No growth, no decay, no birth, no death. No surprise, no anticipation, no memory. Perhaps such a state would be peaceful, eternal stillness, eternal presence. But it would not be life as we know it. It would not be story. It would not be love, for love requires time, the waiting, the longing, the growing, the living together in sequence. To remove time would be to remove the very texture of existence. Seen in this light, time is not punishment but possibility. It is the stage on which meaning can appear. And if it is engineered, then perhaps that was the purpose, not to confine us, but to give us the gift of becoming. Notice how deeply this gift permeates your own life. Your memories give shape to who you are. Your hopes give direction to who you may be. Every struggle you have endured has transformed you, and that transformation was only possible because time carried you through. Every joy you have known, a sunrise, a song, a moment of connection mattered because it happened in time, because it was fleeting and therefore precious. Without time, nothing would ever matter, because nothing would ever change. Speculation stretches further. If time was engineered for meaning, then perhaps each of us is not merely bound by it but invited by it. Invited to participate in a story larger than ourselves. Invited to grow and to give. Invited to live, knowing that each moment matters precisely because it will not return. The fragility of time, far from being a curse, may be its greatest gift. This does not erase the pain of time, the losses, the endings, the irreversibility of grief, but it reframes them. For even sorrow testifies to love, and love requires time. Even death testifies to life, and life requires time. To see time as gift is to recognize that the very things we fear, endings, change, impermanence, are the same things that make meaning possible. So perhaps the architecture of time was not built as cage or punishment, but as offering. A gift given so that beings could live in story, in growth, in meaning. Perhaps we were not imprisoned in time, but entrusted with it. And perhaps the greatest task of existence is to live within this gift with reverence, knowing that each fleeting moment carries the possibility of beauty, and that beauty is possible only because of time. Time may be many things. It may be a natural flow, the inevitable unfolding of physics. It may be emergent, arising from relationships deeper than our equations can yet describe. Or it may be engineered, crafted long before us, tuned like an instrument so that life, memory, and story could exist. Whatever it is, one truth remains. Time is our deepest mystery, and we live our entire existence within its architecture. And so we are left with the question, are we passengers on a river that has always flowed, carried helplessly from past to future? Or are we inhabitants of a great clockwork, a design chosen with care, its gears turning with intention? As you drift toward rest, imagine this. Far beyond the stars, beyond galaxies, beyond even the reach of our imagination, there may stand a clock vast enough to hold the universe itself. Perhaps it ticks on its own, endless and indifferent. Or perhaps, just perhaps, there is a hand that reaches out, now and again, to wind it. And we, in our brief lives, are listening to its chime.